The genesis of the Officio Assassinorum traces back to the blood-soaked battlefields of Terra during the Unification Wars, where the Emperor's conquest of humanity's birthworld demanded more than conventional warfare. Among the techno-barbarian warlords who carved up the irradiated wastelands, paranoia ran as deep as the gene cult's underground laboratories. Traditional military campaigns, while effective against massed armies, proved inadequate when facing enemies who could disappear into the sprawling hive cities or retreat to fortified strongholds buried beneath layers of ancient rubble and toxic storms. The Emperor's earliest assassination protocols emerged from necessity rather than grand design. During the siege of the Caucasus Wastes, Imperial forces found themselves locked in a grinding campaign against the techno-barbarian warlord Callidus of Ursh, whose fortress cities seemed impregnable to direct assault. Rather than sacrifice countless thunder warriors in futile frontal attacks, the Emperor authorized the deployment of specially trained operatives who infiltrated Callidus's inner sanctum. These early assassins bore little resemblance to the refined killers who would later serve the temples. They were brutal, pragmatic killers drawn from the ranks of former gang leaders, ex-military specialists, and survivors of Terra's most violent underhives. The assassination of Callidus himself demonstrated both the potential and limitations of these early methods. The operative, a former Terran enforcer whose name has been lost to Imperial records, managed to breach the warlord's personal chambers by posing as a tribute bearer from a conquered tribe. The killing itself was crude but effective, a monomolecular blade thrust between the ribs while Callidus examined supposed gifts of precious metals. However, the assassin's extraction failed catastrophically. Without proper support networks or escape protocols, the operative was captured and tortured to death, nearly exposing the Emperor's involvement in what appeared to be an internal power struggle. These early failures taught crucial lessons about the need for systematic training, proper equipment, and sophisticated operational planning. The Emperor began recruiting individuals with specific skill sets rather than relying on opportunistic killers. Former members of the gene cult hierarchies proved particularly valuable, as their exposure to biological modification techniques and underground networks provided insights into both assassination methods and target vulnerabilities. The Selenar gene cults, with their deep understanding of human physiology and genetic manipulation, contributed several key figures to these proto-assassination cadres. The elimination of the Pan-Pacific Empire's Leadership Council demonstrated the evolution of Imperial assassination doctrine. Rather than single-target killings, the operation required coordinated strikes against multiple high-value targets spread across the Empire's administrative centers. The assassins deployed poison gas derived from Terran death world flora, introduced through the ventilation systems of the council chambers during a crucial strategic meeting. The simultaneous deaths of 7 major leaders within minutes of each other created a power vacuum that Imperial forces exploited with devastating efficiency. As the Unification Wars progressed, the Emperor's assassination capabilities attracted the attention of Malcador the Sigillite. The ancient psyker recognized that ad hoc killing squads, while effective in the short term, lacked the institutional framework necessary for long-term operations. Malcador's involvement marked the transition from crude murder to sophisticated statecraft through elimination. His first major contribution was the establishment of recruitment protocols that identified potential assassins during childhood, allowing for decades of specialized training rather than hasty conversion of existing personnel. Malcador's approach to organizational structure drew heavily from his understanding of both human psychology and the practical requirements of clandestine operations. He established the principle of compartmentalization that would become fundamental to the Officio Assassinorum's operations. Individual assassins would know only their specific mission parameters, while broader strategic objectives remained the province of higher-ranking coordinators. This system protected against the kind of catastrophic intelligence breaches that had plagued earlier operations. The Sigillite's most significant innovation was the recognition that different types of targets required fundamentally different approaches. A techno-barbarian warlord surrounded by crude but effective bodyguards presented entirely different challenges than a gene cult patriarch protected by sophisticated biological defenses and psychic wards. Rather than training generalist killers, Malcador began developing specialized disciplines that would eventually evolve into the formal temple system. The Proto-Vindicare discipline emerged from the need to eliminate targets at extreme range, particularly those who rarely exposed themselves to close-quarters threats. Early snipers used modified las rifles and primitive scope systems, but the development of specialized ammunition and targeting systems transformed long-range assassination into a precise science. The first recorded use of what would become signature Vindicare techniques occurred during the siege of the Indonesian bloc, where an operative eliminated 3 separate warlords from positions over 2 kilometers away, using different ammunition types tailored to each target's specific defensive measures. The foundations of the Callidus discipline developed from encounters with shape-shifting gene cults and mutant infiltrators. Imperial forces discovered that conventional security measures proved inadequate against enemies who could alter their physical appearance or mimic trusted individuals. The counter-infiltration specialists who would eventually become the Callidus Temple began as investigators and hunters tasked with identifying and eliminating such threats. Their training emphasized not just physical transformation, but deep psychological conditioning that allowed them to maintain false identities for extended periods. Eversor techniques originated from the Emperor's encounters with heavily fortified positions that required more than surgical strikes. Some targets could only be reached through areas densely packed with hostile forces, making stealth approaches impossible. The early Eversor operatives were volunteers subjected to extensive chemical and surgical modification, transforming them into living weapons, capable of carving through dozens of enemies to reach their primary target. The first recorded Eversor deployment occurred during the assault on the Nordafric conclaves, where a single operative fought through an entire palace complex, eliminating guards, servants, and finally the conclave leadership before succumbing to accumulated injuries. The Proto-Culexus discipline emerged from the Emperor's recognition that some enemies could only be defeated through psychic means. Gene cult patriarchs and certain techno-barbarian leaders possessed psychic abilities that made them nearly impossible to approach through conventional methods. The individuals who would eventually form the Culexus Temple were recruited from among those rare humans who demonstrated natural resistance to psychic influence. Their training involved exposure to controlled psychic attacks, gradually building their natural defenses into active weapons capable of disrupting enemy psykers. The establishment of formal training facilities marked another crucial development in the evolution of Imperial assassination capabilities. Rather than conducting operations from improvised bases, Malcador authorized the construction of specialized complexes hidden within Terra's vast underground networks. These facilities, carved from the bedrock beneath the Imperial Palace, provided controlled environments for developing and testing new techniques. The training regimens implemented in these early facilities emphasized not just combat skills, but the psychological conditioning necessary to function as instruments of Imperial will. The recruitment networks established during this period would persist throughout the Great Crusade and beyond. Malcador's agents identified potential candidates through a combination of psychological profiling, genetic analysis, and observation of behavior under extreme stress. Candidates were typically recruited during adolescence, when their personalities remained malleable enough for the intensive conditioning required. The selection process was deliberately harsh, with mortality rates exceeding 90% during the most intensive training phases. The philosophical foundations of the assassination disciplines reflected the Emperor's broader vision for human unity under imperial rule. Each temple developed its own interpretation of how best to serve the imperial cause, but all shared the fundamental principle that individual lives were expendable in service of humanity's greater destiny. This ideology proved crucial in maintaining operational effectiveness, as it provided psychological justification for the extreme measures required in assassination operations. The integration of assassination capabilities into broader imperial strategy required careful coordination with other military and administrative branches. The early Officio Assassinorum worked closely with the emerging administratum to identify high-value targets and assess the political ramifications of their elimination. Intelligence networks provided crucial information about target locations, defensive measures, and personal vulnerabilities. The relationship between assassins and conventional military forces remained deliberately limited, maintaining operational security while ensuring that assassination operations supported rather than undermined broader strategic objectives. The transition from the Unification Wars to the Great Crusade brought new challenges and opportunities for the developing Officio Assassinorum. The conquest of Terra had demonstrated the effectiveness of targeted elimination against human enemies, but the expansion into the wider galaxy would require adaptation to alien threats and environments. The organizational structures and training methods established during the Unification Wars provided the foundation for this expansion, but significant modifications would be necessary to address the unique challenges of interstellar warfare. The Grand Master of Assassins occupies a position of singular authority within the Officio Assassinorum, wielding power that extends far beyond the conventional boundaries of imperial bureaucracy. This individual, whose identity remains hidden behind layers of security protocols and administrative obfuscation, serves as the ultimate arbiter of life and death for countless targets across the galaxy. The Grand Master's authority derives not from any single imperial decree, but from a complex web of ancient compacts, sealed orders, and traditional privileges that stretch back to the earliest days of the Imperium. The Grand Master's chambers, located deep within the bowels of Terra's administrative complex, exist in a state of perpetual twilight. The walls are lined with data slates containing the names of potential targets, each entry representing years of intelligence gathering and strategic analysis. Servo skulls drift through the air, their mechanical eyes recording every conversation and gesture for later review by the Grand Master's staff. The chamber's most prominent feature is a massive hololithic display that can project detailed tactical information about any ongoing assassination operation, allowing the Grand Master to monitor multiple missions simultaneously across different sectors of the galaxy. The position requires an individual capable of processing vast amounts of intelligence data while maintaining the psychological detachment necessary to order the deaths of imperial citizens, alien leaders, and heretical cultists with equal dispassion. The Grand Master must balance the competing demands of the four primary temples, each with their own operational preferences and resource requirements. A typical day might involve authorizing a Vindicare strike against a rebellious planetary governor, approving the deployment of a Callidus operative to infiltrate a suspected chaos cult, and reviewing the psychological conditioning protocols for newly recruited Eversor candidates. The Grand Master's relationship with the High Lords of Terra operates through a carefully maintained system of formal protocols and informal understandings. Direct communication between the Grand Master and the High Lords occurs only during the most critical circumstances, typically involving threats to the stability of the Imperium itself. More routine coordination takes place through designated liaison officers who serve as intermediaries between the Officio Assassinorum and other imperial institutions. These liaisons, drawn from the ranks of senior administratum officials, undergo extensive security screening and psychological conditioning to ensure their absolute loyalty to both organizations. The liaison protocols themselves represent a masterpiece of bureaucratic complexity designed to maintain operational security while ensuring accountability to imperial authority. Each liaison officer maintains multiple sets of credentials and cover identities, allowing them to move freely between different levels of the imperial hierarchy without arousing suspicion. They carry sealed orders that can only be opened under specific circumstances, typically involving the death or incapacitation of their primary contacts within either organization. The liaisons also serve as conduits for intelligence sharing, ensuring that the Officio Assassinorum receives timely information about emerging threats while providing the High Lords with carefully filtered reports about ongoing operations. The Grand Master's authority extends downward through a rigid hierarchical structure that ensures clear chains of command while maintaining the compartmentalization necessary for security. Immediately below the Grand Master are the 4 Temple Masters, each responsible for overseeing their respective disciplines and maintaining the specialized training facilities required for their operatives. The Temple Masters enjoy considerable autonomy in operational matters, including the selection of targets within their areas of expertise and the deployment of their assassins to different theaters of operation. The relationship between the Grand Master and the Temple Masters reflects the unique requirements of assassination operations. Unlike conventional military hierarchies, where orders flow downward through clearly defined channels, the Officio Assassinorum operates on a system of mission parameters and operational objectives. The Grand Master provides strategic guidance and resource allocation, while the Temple Masters translate these directives into specific tactical plans suited to their operatives' capabilities. This system allows for rapid response to emerging threats while maintaining the security protocols necessary to protect ongoing operations. Each Temple Master maintains their own intelligence networks and support staff, creating parallel organizational structures that can operate independently if necessary. The Vindicare Temple Master oversees a network of spotters, equipment specialists, and safe house operators who provide the logistical support necessary for long-range assassination operations. The Callidus Temple Master coordinates with infiltration specialists, document forgers, and deep cover agents who can provide the false identities and background information required for successful impersonation missions. The Eversor Temple Master supervises the medical technicians, combat instructors, and equipment specialists who maintain the complex life support systems that keep Eversor operatives functional between missions. The Culexus Temple Master faces unique challenges in maintaining their operatives, as the psychic null field generated by Culexus assassins makes direct supervision difficult and potentially dangerous. The Temple Master must coordinate operations through intermediaries who can tolerate brief exposure to the null field, while maintaining the specialized facilities required to house and transport operatives whose very presence disrupts normal human psychology. The Culexus Temple's organizational structure reflects these constraints, with smaller operational cells and more autonomous field operations than the other temples. The selection process for Temple Masters represents one of the most carefully guarded secrets within the Officio Assassinorum. Candidates typically emerge from the ranks of senior operatives who have demonstrated exceptional skill in their chosen discipline, combined with the administrative capabilities necessary to manage complex organizations. The selection process involves extensive psychological evaluation, including exposure to scenarios designed to test the candidate's ability to make difficult decisions under extreme pressure. Successful candidates undergo additional conditioning that enhances their natural resistance to psychic influence and provides them with the mental disciplines necessary to maintain operational security. The Temple Master's accountability to the Grand Master operates through a system of regular reports and periodic personal meetings. These sessions, conducted in secure facilities beneath the Imperial Palace, allow the Grand Master to assess the effectiveness of ongoing operations and adjust strategic priorities as necessary. The Temple Masters must provide detailed accounting of their resource utilization, including the deployment of operatives, the consumption of specialized equipment, and the maintenance of training facilities. They also submit intelligence assessments that help inform the Grand Master's strategic planning and target selection processes. The Officio Assassinorum's position within the broader imperial bureaucracy requires careful navigation of competing interests and jurisdictional boundaries. The organization maintains formal relationships with numerous other imperial institutions, each governed by specific protocols and agreements that define the scope of cooperation and potential areas of conflict. The relationship with the Inquisition represents one of the most complex and potentially volatile aspects of these inter-organizational dynamics. The Inquisition's mandate to investigate and eliminate threats to the Imperium creates natural areas of overlap with the Officio Assassinorum's mission. Both organizations possess the authority to eliminate Imperial citizens suspected of heresy, corruption, or treason, but their methods and operational philosophies differ significantly. The Inquisition typically conducts extensive investigations before taking action, gathering evidence and building cases against suspected heretics. The Officio Assassinorum operates on the principle of surgical elimination, removing threats with minimal investigation or collateral damage. The protocols governing cooperation between the two organizations reflect these philosophical differences while establishing clear boundaries for their respective operations. Inquisitors can request assassination services through formal channels, but they must provide detailed justification for their requests and accept responsibility for the consequences of the operation. The Officio Assassinorum reserves the right to refuse requests that conflict with their ongoing operations or compromise their security protocols. In practice, most cooperation occurs at the operational level, where individual inquisitors work with specific temple representatives to coordinate activities in particular sectors or regions. The relationship with the Adeptus Archives operates on different principles, as the Archives' law enforcement mandate rarely conflicts directly with assassination operations. The Archives maintain order within imperial society through conventional police methods, while the Officio Assassinorum addresses threats that require more extreme measures. However, the two organizations share intelligence networks and occasionally coordinate operations against criminal organizations or seditious movements that threaten imperial stability. The Archives' extensive surveillance networks provide valuable intelligence about potential targets and their activities, while the Officio Assassinorum's operations can eliminate threats that exceed the Archives' conventional law enforcement capabilities. The formal protocols governing this relationship emphasize information sharing and mutual support, with specific provisions for joint operations against threats that require both investigative and elimination capabilities. Internal security within the Officio Assassinorum operates through multiple layers of psychological conditioning, technological safeguards, and administrative oversight. The organization's most sensitive operations and personnel require protection not only from external threats, but from the potential consequences of internal compromise or betrayal. The security measures implemented reflect the understanding that even the most loyal operatives can be corrupted, coerced, or psychologically compromised by the extreme nature of their duties. Mind locks represent the most fundamental level of internal security, implemented through a combination of surgical implants and psychological conditioning that prevents operatives from revealing sensitive information even under extreme duress. These devices, installed during the final stages of training, create neural pathways that trigger automatic responses when specific information is accessed. An operative attempting to reveal classified information will experience severe psychological distress, including memory fragmentation and temporary paralysis, making coherent communication impossible. The mind lock technology varies between the different temples, reflecting their unique operational requirements and security concerns. Vindicare operatives receive implants that protect tactical information about their targets and operational methods, while allowing them to function normally in social situations that might be necessary for their cover identities. Callidus operatives undergo more extensive conditioning that protects their true identities and infiltration techniques, but allows for the personality flexibility necessary for successful impersonation missions. Eversor operatives present unique challenges for mind lock implementation, as their extensive chemical and surgical modifications can interfere with standard neural implants. The security measures for Eversor operatives rely more heavily on psychological conditioning and chemical dependencies that ensure their loyalty through biological necessity. The combat stimulants and life support systems that keep Eversor operatives functional create a form of technological dependence that serves as both enhancement and security measure. Culexus operatives require specialized mind lock technology that can function despite their psychic null field. The implants used for Culexus operatives incorporate unique materials and design features that resist the disruptive effects of the null field while maintaining their security functions. The psychological conditioning for Culexus operatives focuses on reinforcing their already limited emotional responses and social connections, creating individuals who are psychologically incapable of forming the relationships that might compromise their loyalty. Psychic conditioning represents another crucial layer of internal security, implemented through controlled exposure to psychic influence during training and regular maintenance sessions throughout an operative's career. This conditioning creates mental barriers that resist external psychic manipulation while reinforcing loyalty to the Imperium and the Officio Assassinorum. The conditioning process involves exposure to carefully controlled psychic attacks that strengthen the operative's natural mental defenses while implanting specific response patterns that activate under threat. The psychic conditioning protocols vary significantly between temples, reflecting their different operational environments and threat profiles. Vindicare operatives receive conditioning that enhances their focus and concentration while protecting against psychic interference that might affect their marksmanship. Callidus operatives undergo conditioning that strengthens their ability to maintain false identities under psychic scrutiny while protecting their true memories and loyalties. The most severe internal security measure involves the conversion of failed or compromised operatives into death cult assassins. This process, reserved for cases where traditional disciplinary measures prove inadequate, involves extensive surgical modification and psychological reconditioning that transforms the individual into a fanatical killing machine. The threat of this conversion serves as a powerful deterrent against betrayal or failure, while the process itself ensures that compromised operatives cannot reveal sensitive information to enemies. The conversion process begins with the surgical removal of higher brain functions responsible for independent thought and decision-making. The operative's memories are selectively edited to remove all knowledge of Officio Assassinorum operations and personnel, while preserving their combat skills and physical conditioning. Extensive chemical modification enhances their physical capabilities while reducing their capacity for complex reasoning or emotional response. The resulting death cult assassins serve as both punishment and resource, deployed in situations where their fanatical loyalty and enhanced combat capabilities prove useful. They operate under the direct control of designated handlers who provide tactical guidance and mission parameters, functioning as living weapons rather than independent operatives. The knowledge that failure or betrayal leads to this fate creates a powerful psychological pressure that reinforces the loyalty conditioning implemented during initial training. The Callidus Temple operates from a fortress monastery buried deep within the Himalayan mountains, its corridors filled with the constant hum of polymorphine synthesis equipment and the subtle chemical tang of shape-shifting compounds. The temple's primary facility extends through natural cave systems that have been expanded and reinforced over millennia, creating a labyrinthine complex where reality itself seems malleable. Training chambers equipped with hololithic projectors can recreate any environment in the galaxy, from the marble halls of imperial palaces to the cramped confines of Hive city undercity warrens. The walls themselves are lined with alcoves containing thousands of identity templates, each one a complete psychological profile and physical description of individuals who might serve as cover identities for Callidus operatives. Polymorphine represents the cornerstone of Callidus operations, a bioalchemical compound that allows operatives to alter their physical appearance at the cellular level. The substance, derived from rare organisms found in the deepest ocean trenches of Terra, requires careful preparation and precise dosing to achieve the desired effects without causing permanent genetic damage. A single dose of polymorphine can maintain physical alterations for several hours, allowing a Callidus operative to assume the appearance of virtually any human within reasonable size parameters. The transformation process itself is intensely painful, as bones stretch or compress, muscle mass redistributes, and facial features reshape themselves according to the operative's mental template. The training regimen for Callidus operatives begins with extensive study of human psychology and social dynamics. Candidates spend years learning to analyze speech patterns, body language, and behavioral quirks that define individual personalities. They practice mimicking specific individuals using detailed recordings and psychological profiles, learning to replicate not just physical appearance, but the subtle mannerisms that make impersonation convincing. The most challenging aspect of this training involves learning to suppress their own personality traits while maintaining the mental discipline necessary to remember their true mission objectives. Advanced Callidus training includes exposure to various forms of torture and interrogation techniques, ensuring that operatives can maintain their cover identities even under extreme duress. The psychological conditioning implemented during this phase creates multiple layers of false memories and personality constructs that can be activated as needed. A fully trained Callidus operative can maintain up to 7 different cover identities simultaneously, each complete with appropriate emotional responses and behavioral patterns. The mental compartmentalization required for this capability often results in permanent psychological changes that make it difficult for operatives to form genuine personal relationships. The Callidus Temple's most famous deployment occurred during the Vindicare heresy, when a single operative spent 3 years infiltrating the ecclesiarchy's highest levels. The operative, whose true identity remains classified, assumed the identity of a minor administrative official within the Adeptus Archives and gradually worked their way into Vindicare's inner circle. The assassination itself required the operative to maintain their false identity while serving as one of Vindicare's personal advisors, gathering intelligence about his defensive measures and daily routines. The final strike came during a private meeting where the operative revealed their true nature and eliminated Vindicare with a neural disruptor concealed within their robes. Callidus operatives carry specialized equipment designed to support their infiltration missions. The Khatan Phase Sword, a weapon that can shift between solid and incorporeal states, allows operatives to bypass conventional armor and defensive systems. The sword's blade exists partially in normal space and partially in a parallel dimension, making it capable of cutting through virtually any material while remaining undetectable to most scanning equipment. The weapon's power source is integrated into the operative's body during final training, creating a symbiotic relationship between assassin and weapon that cannot be replicated by unauthorized users. The neural shredder represents another crucial piece of Callidus equipment, a compact weapon that disrupts the electrical patterns within a target's nervous system. The device can be configured to cause temporary paralysis, permanent brain damage, or instant death depending on the mission requirements. Its compact size allows it to be concealed within seemingly innocent objects such as jewelry, writing implements, or ceremonial items that would not arouse suspicion during security screenings. The Eversor Temple's Fortress Monastery occupies a heavily fortified complex in the Urals, its architecture designed to contain the barely controlled violence of its inhabitants. The facility's walls are constructed from reinforced ceramite and incorporate multiple layers of containment fields designed to prevent Eversor operatives from escaping during their periods of enhanced aggression. The training areas resemble gladiatorial arenas more than conventional military facilities, with reinforced floors and walls that can withstand the devastating combat capabilities of fully enhanced operatives. Medical facilities occupy nearly half of the complex, staffed by biologist adepts who specialize in the extreme surgical modifications required to create Eversor assassins. The Eversor enhancement process begins with extensive genetic screening to identify candidates capable of surviving the radical physical modifications required. The procedure involves the surgical implantation of multiple organ systems designed to regulate the flow of combat stimulants and life support chemicals throughout the operative's body. The heart is replaced with a dual-chambered organ capable of pumping both blood and chemical enhancers at rates that would be fatal to unmodified humans. The nervous system receives synthetic neural pathways that can process sensory information at superhuman speeds while maintaining fine motor control during combat operations. Combat stimulants represent the most crucial aspect of Eversor enhancement, a cocktail of synthetic compounds that enhance physical capabilities while suppressing pain responses and fear reactions. The primary component, known as frenzon, increases reaction times and physical strength by factors of 10 or more, while inducing a state of controlled berserker fury. Secondary compounds include pain suppressors that allow operatives to continue fighting despite severe injuries, and adrenaline enhancers that maintain peak performance levels for extended periods. The chemical mixture is carefully calibrated for each individual operative, as improper dosing can result in permanent psychological damage or death. The Eversor serum itself represents a masterpiece of bioalchemical engineering, a compound that triggers controlled cellular regeneration while maintaining the operative's enhanced physical capabilities. The serum allows Eversor operatives to recover from injuries that would be fatal to normal humans, including severe blood loss, organ damage, and bone fractures. However, the regenerative process requires enormous amounts of energy and nutrients, necessitating the constant infusion of specialized nutrients and chemical supplements. An active Eversor operative consumes approximately 10 times the caloric intake of a normal human, with most of this energy directed toward maintaining their enhanced metabolic processes. The psychological conditioning for Eversor operatives focuses on channeling their enhanced aggression towards specific targets while maintaining enough tactical awareness to complete complex missions. The process involves controlled exposure to combat situations that gradually increase in intensity and complexity, allowing operatives to learn to function effectively despite their chemically induced berserker state. The conditioning also includes extensive training in urban warfare, close quarters combat, and demolitions, ensuring that Eversor operatives can adapt to various mission environments. Eversor deployment protocols require specialized containment and transport systems designed to maintain the operative's life support functions while preventing accidental activation. The standard Eversor drop pod incorporates multiple layers of restraint systems and chemical regulators that keep the operative in a state of controlled hibernation until deployment. Upon reaching the target area, the pod systems automatically begin the activation sequence, flooding the operative's body with combat stimulants and awakening them in a state of controlled fury directed toward their designated targets. The Vindicare temple maintains its primary facility within the petitioner's city surrounding the imperial palace, its external appearance resembling a modest administratum office complex. The building's interior reveals its true purpose through the presence of extensive firing ranges that extend deep into Terra's bedrock, some stretching for kilometers to accommodate the extreme ranges at which Vindicare operatives must demonstrate proficiency. The facility's most impressive feature is the Probability Calculation Center, a massive cogitator complex that can analyze millions of variables affecting long-range marksmanship, including atmospheric conditions, target movement patterns, and gravitational anomalies. Vindicare training begins with extensive study of ballistics, physics, and environmental factors that affect projectile trajectory over extreme distances. Candidates learn to calculate firing solutions manually, without relying on technological aids that might be unavailable or compromised during field operations. The training includes exposure to various atmospheric conditions, gravitational fields, and environmental hazards that might be encountered on different worlds throughout the galaxy. Advanced candidates practice shooting in zero-gravity, high-pressure atmospheres, and environments with unusual electromagnetic properties that can affect projectile behavior. The selection process for Vindicare operatives emphasizes individuals with exceptional hand-eye coordination, spatial reasoning abilities, and the psychological stability necessary to remain motionless for extended periods while waiting for the perfect shot. Candidates undergo extensive testing of their visual acuity, reaction times, and ability to maintain focus under stressful conditions. The final selection criteria includes psychological evaluation to identify individuals capable of taking human life from a distance without experiencing debilitating emotional reactions. Vindicare equipment represents the pinnacle of Imperial marksmanship technology, with each operative receiving a custom-manufactured Exodus rifle tailored to their specific physical characteristics and shooting style. The rifle incorporates advanced targeting systems that can calculate firing solutions for targets at ranges exceeding 8 kilometers, taking into account factors such as planetary rotation, atmospheric density, and target movement patterns. The weapon's power source can maintain consistent performance for months of continuous operation, while its construction materials resist damage from extreme temperatures, electromagnetic interference, and corrosive environments. The Exodus rifle's ammunition selection reflects the diverse range of targets that Vindicare operatives must engage. Shield breaker rounds incorporate miniaturized disruptor fields that can penetrate energy barriers and personal force fields. Hellfire rounds contain concentrated acid compounds that can dissolve through heavy armor plating. Turbo-penetrator rounds use dense metal cores and shaped charge warheads to defeat even the heaviest vehicle armor. Each ammunition type requires different ballistic calculations and firing techniques, necessitating extensive training in their proper application. The Culexus Temple operates from a facility located in the Australian Dead Zone, its location chosen specifically for its isolation from major population centers and psychic phenomena. The temple's architecture incorporates specialized materials and construction techniques designed to contain and focus the psychic null field generated by its operatives. The walls are lined with psychically inert metals and incorporate geometric patterns that help channel and direct psychic energy away from sensitive areas. The facility's most distinctive feature is the central meditation chamber, a spherical room where Culexus operatives can practice focusing their null field without affecting the temple's support staff. Culexus recruitment focuses on individuals who demonstrate natural resistance to psychic influence, a trait that occurs in approximately 1 in 10 million humans. These potential operatives, known as blanks or psychic nulls, generate a natural field that disrupts psychic phenomena and causes severe psychological distress in normal humans. The recruitment process involves extensive testing to determine the strength and controllability of each candidate's null field, as well as psychological evaluation to assess their ability to function despite their natural isolation from human society. The enhancement process for Culexus operatives involves the surgical implantation of the animus speculum, a device that focuses and amplifies the operative's natural psychic null field. The speculum, resembling a stylized skull mask, incorporates psychically active materials that resonate with the operative's null field and direct it towards specific targets. The device allows Culexus operatives to project concentrated bursts of psychic nullification that can permanently damage or destroy the minds of psykers and other psychically sensitive individuals. The animus speculum's construction requires rare materials and manufacturing techniques that are closely guarded secrets of the Culexus Temple. The device's core components include fragments of psychically inert crystals found only in the deepest regions of Terra's crust, as well as synthetic materials created through processes that involve controlled exposure to warp energy. The manufacturing process itself is extremely dangerous, as the materials involved can cause permanent psychological damage to unprotected individuals. Each speculum is custom fitted to its intended operative, creating a symbiotic relationship between device and wearer that cannot be replicated by unauthorized users. Culexus training emphasizes the development of mental disciplines that allow operatives to control and direct their null field with precision. The training process involves meditation techniques derived from ancient Terran traditions, combined with technological aids that help operatives visualize and manipulate psychic energy patterns. Advanced training includes exposure to controlled psychic attacks, allowing operatives to learn to use their null field defensively while maintaining the ability to function in combat situations. The psychological conditioning for Culexus operatives addresses the unique challenges posed by their natural isolation from human society. The null field generated by these individuals causes severe discomfort and fear reactions in normal humans, making it impossible for them to form conventional social relationships. The conditioning process helps operatives develop coping mechanisms for this isolation while reinforcing their loyalty to the Imperium and their sense of purpose as protectors against psychic threats. Culexus deployment protocols require specialized containment and transport systems designed to minimize the operative's effect on friendly personnel while maximizing their impact against psychic targets. The standard Culexus deployment involves the use of automated transport systems that can deliver the operative to their target area without requiring direct human contact. The operative's equipment includes specialized communication devices that can function despite the disruptive effects of the null field, allowing for coordination with support personnel while maintaining operational security. The polymorphine coursing through a Callidus operative's bloodstream represents one of the most horrific achievements of Imperial bioalchemy, a substance that triggers systematic cellular restructuring at the molecular level. The drug's effects begin within minutes of injection, as specialized enzymes attack the protein matrices that define bone density, muscle fiber composition, and cartilage structure. The operative's skeleton becomes temporarily malleable, allowing bones to compress or extend by up to 30% of their original length while maintaining structural integrity. Muscle tissue redistributes itself according to predetermined neural patterns, flowing like liquid beneath the skin as the operative's body assumes its new configuration. The transformation process inflicts agony that would drive most humans to madness, as nerve endings fire continuously while being physically relocated throughout the changing tissue. The operative's face becomes a shifting mask of flesh as cheekbones migrate, jawlines reshape, and eye sockets adjust their dimensions to accommodate the new identity. Even the operative's vocal cords undergo modification, stretching or contracting to produce different tonal qualities and speech patterns. The most disturbing aspect of the transformation involves the temporary liquefaction of subcutaneous fat deposits, which flow beneath the skin like warm oil before solidifying into new patterns that define the target identity's physical characteristics. Callidus operatives undergo decades of psychological conditioning designed to maintain their sanity during these cellular reconstructions. The training begins with exposure to controlled doses of polymorphine that produce minor physical changes, allowing candidates to gradually adapt to the sensation of their body betraying its fundamental nature. Advanced conditioning involves complete identity immersion, where operatives spend months living as different individuals while their bodies remain in constant flux. The psychological frameworks developed during this training create mental compartments that can isolate the operative's true consciousness from the physical trauma of transformation. The conditioning process creates multiple personality matrices within the operative's mind, each one corresponding to a specific cover identity, complete with appropriate emotional responses and behavioral patterns. These artificial personalities serve as psychological shields that protect the operative's core identity from the stress of prolonged impersonation. A fully conditioned Callidus operative can maintain up to 12 different personality constructs simultaneously, switching between them as mission requirements dictate. The mental discipline required for this capability often results in permanent dissociation from normal human emotional responses, creating individuals who struggle to form genuine personal attachments even when not on active duty. Callidus infiltration techniques extend far beyond simple physical impersonation, encompassing comprehensive identity theft that can fool even intimate associates of the target. The preparation for a deep cover operation begins months before deployment, with intelligence operatives gathering detailed information about the intended cover, identity's personal history, relationships, and behavioral quirks. The operative studies hundreds of hours of surveillance footage, learning to replicate specific gestures, speech patterns, and unconscious habits that define the target's personality. Voice training involves surgical modification of the operative's larynx and vocal cords, allowing them to produce exact vocal matches for their cover identity. The most sophisticated Callidus operations involve the complete replacement of existing individuals within target organizations, requiring the elimination of the original person and the seamless assumption of their role. These operations demand extensive preparation, as the operative must be prepared to interact with family members, close friends, and professional associates who possess intimate knowledge of the target's personality and history. The operative receives detailed briefings about personal relationships, including romantic partnerships, family dynamics, and professional rivalries that might expose inconsistencies in their impersonation. The elimination phase of identity replacement operations requires careful timing and precise execution to avoid arousing suspicion among the target's associates. The Callidus operative typically arranges a private meeting with their target, using fabricated emergencies or professional obligations to ensure isolation from potential witnesses. The killing itself must appear accidental or natural, as any evidence of foul play would compromise the subsequent impersonation. Preferred methods include exotic poisons that mimic natural death, staged accidents that leave the body intact for identification purposes, and psychological manipulation that drives the target to suicide. The assumption of a new identity requires the operative to maintain their cover while gathering intelligence about their primary mission objectives. This dual existence creates enormous psychological pressure, as the operative must balance the demands of their false identity with the requirements of their assassination mission. Family members and close associates expect emotional responses and personal interactions that the operative must provide, while simultaneously planning the elimination of their true targets. The most challenging aspect involves maintaining intimate relationships, as romantic partners and family members possess detailed knowledge of personal habits and emotional patterns that are difficult to replicate convincingly. Callidus operatives have successfully infiltrated some of the most secure organizations in the Imperium, including planetary governorships, space marine chapter command structures, and even inquisitorial retinues. The impersonation of Governor Vangorich of Necromunda required a Callidus operative to maintain their cover for over 2 years, while systematically eliminating the leadership of a chaos cult that had infiltrated the planet's ruling council. The operative assumed the identity of the governor's personal secretary, a position that provided access to sensitive communications and private meetings, while remaining below the attention threshold of most security protocols. The operation's success depended on the operative's ability to maintain their cover while conducting a series of carefully orchestrated assassinations that appeared unrelated to outside observers. The cult's high priest died from an apparent heart attack during a private meeting with the governor, while other key members succumbed to various accidents and illnesses over the following months. The operative's position allowed them to manipulate the governor's schedule and communications, ensuring that the cult's elimination appeared to result from natural causes rather than systematic targeting. The infiltration of Space Marine chapters presents unique challenges due to the enhanced senses and psychological conditioning of Astartes warriors. Callidus operatives targeting chapter facilities typically assume the identities of human serfs, administrative personnel, or technical specialists who provide essential support services without requiring direct interaction with the Space Marines themselves. The operative must demonstrate technical competence in their assumed role while avoiding the enhanced scrutiny that Space Marines apply to all human personnel within their facilities. The assassination of Chapter Master Mordian of the Iron Skulls required a Callidus operative to spend 3 years working as a maintenance technician within the chapter's fortress monastery. The operative's cover identity included extensive technical training and fabricated work history that withstood the chapter's security screening procedures. The assassination itself occurred during routine maintenance of the chapter master's personal quarters, where the operative introduced a slow-acting toxin into the air recycling system. The poison, derived from rare fungi found in the depths of hive cities, produced symptoms that resembled a rare genetic disorder affecting some space marines in their advanced years. The specialized equipment carried by Callidus operatives reflects their need for weapons and tools that can pass security screening while providing lethal capabilities when activated. The Khatan Phase Sword represents the pinnacle of Callidus weaponry, a blade that exists partially in normal space and partially in a parallel dimension that allows it to bypass conventional defenses. The weapon's hilt appears to be a simple ceremonial object, often disguised as jewelry or religious artifacts that would not arouse suspicion during security checks. When activated, the blade materializes from the parallel dimension, creating a cutting edge that can slice through molecular bonds and ignore most forms of armor protection. The Phase Sword's unique properties result from its construction using materials harvested from Khatan technology, specifically fragments of living metal that retain some of the ancient being's reality-manipulating capabilities. The blade's edge exists in a state of quantum flux, allowing it to phase through solid matter while maintaining its cutting properties. This capability makes the weapon particularly effective against targets protected by power armor or force fields, as the blade can bypass these defenses entirely. The weapon's power source draws energy from the wielder's bioelectric field, creating a symbiotic relationship that prevents unauthorized use by individuals who lack the proper neural conditioning. The Neural Shredder serves as the Callidus operative's primary ranged weapon, a device that disrupts the electrical patterns within a target's nervous system through focused electromagnetic pulses. The weapon's compact design allows it to be concealed within seemingly innocent objects such as data slates, writing implements, or personal communicators. When activated, the device generates a precisely tuned electromagnetic field that interferes with neural transmission, causing effects ranging from temporary paralysis to permanent brain damage, depending on the power setting and duration of exposure. The Neural Shredder's effectiveness varies significantly based on the target's physiology and protective equipment. Unaugmented humans typically succumb to the weapon's effects within seconds, experiencing complete nervous system shutdown that results in immediate death. Targets with cybernetic implants or enhanced nervous systems may resist the weapon's effects, requiring multiple applications or higher power settings to achieve the desired result. The weapon's energy requirements limit its use to a small number of shots before requiring recharging, making precise targeting essential for mission success. The Poison Kiss delivery system represents one of the most insidious weapons in the Callidus arsenal, a method of toxin delivery that exploits the intimate nature of human social interaction. The operative undergoes surgical modification of their salivary glands, installing microscopic reservoirs that can store and release various toxins through normal oral contact. The toxins themselves are carefully selected for their delayed action and difficulty of detection, allowing the operative to eliminate targets through seemingly innocent social interactions, such as greeting kisses or shared meals. The Poison Kiss system can deliver a wide variety of toxins depending on mission requirements, including paralytic agents that incapacitate targets for capture, hallucinogens that cause temporary madness or disorientation, and lethal compounds that produce death through apparent natural causes. The most sophisticated toxins are engineered to remain dormant within the target system for predetermined periods, allowing the operative to establish alibis and distance themselves from the victim before the poison takes effect. The delivery system's effectiveness depends on the operative's ability to initiate appropriate physical contact without arousing suspicion, requiring extensive training in social manipulation and cultural customs. The psychological toll of Callidus operations extends beyond the physical trauma of polymorphine transformation, encompassing the emotional damage inflicted by prolonged deception and betrayal of trust. Operatives must often form seemingly genuine relationships with their targets and their associates, creating emotional connections that serve their mission objectives while knowing that these relationships will ultimately end in death and betrayal. The cognitive dissonance created by this dual existence frequently results in permanent psychological damage that manifests as inability to form authentic personal relationships even after mission completion. The temple's psychological support systems attempt to address these issues through regular conditioning sessions and therapeutic interventions designed to compartmentalize the operative's emotional responses. However, the fundamental nature of Callidus operations makes complete psychological recovery impossible for most operatives. The constant need to suppress their true identity while maintaining false emotional connections creates a form of learned dissociation that becomes permanent over time. Many veteran Callidus operatives report feeling like observers of their own lives, watching themselves perform actions and express emotions without experiencing genuine feeling or connection to their experiences. The Eversor transformation begins in the sterile preparation chambers deep within the temple's medical complex, where candidates undergo the most radical physical modifications attempted by imperial science. The process commences with the complete replacement of the subject's cardiovascular system, as their natural heart proves inadequate for the extreme metabolic demands of combat enhancement. The new organ, a biomechanical construct twice the size of a human heart, incorporates dual pumping chambers capable of circulating both oxygenated blood and combat stimulants throughout the body at pressures that would rupture normal blood vessels. The arterial system receives extensive reinforcement through the implantation of synthetic vessel linings that can withstand the corrosive effects of combat drugs while maintaining flexibility under extreme physical stress. These vessels, woven from biocompatible ceramite fibers, create a secondary circulatory network dedicated to stimulant distribution that operates independently of the primary blood supply. The nervous system undergoes equally dramatic modification, with synthetic neural pathways grafted onto the existing nerve clusters to accelerate reaction times and enhance pain tolerance. These artificial neurons, grown in specialized biovats using stem cells harvested from the candidate's own bone marrow, integrate seamlessly with natural neural tissue while providing superhuman response capabilities. The skeletal system receives reinforcement through the injection of metallic compounds that bond with existing bone structure at the molecular level. The process involves the controlled introduction of adamantium particles into the bone marrow, where they integrate with calcium deposits to create a hybrid structure that maintains flexibility while providing enhanced impact resistance. The candidate's muscles undergo systematic replacement with synthetic fibers that contract with 10 times the force of natural muscle tissue, while requiring significantly less recovery time between exertions. These artificial muscles, grown in nutrient baths containing concentrated protein solutions and growth hormones, attach to the reinforced skeleton through biomechanical interfaces that distribute stress loads across multiple attachment points. The digestive system receives extensive modification to process the enormous caloric requirements of an active Eversor operative. The stomach is replaced with a biomechanical processing unit capable of breaking down virtually any organic matter into usable nutrients, while the intestinal tract receives synthetic linings that accelerate absorption rates by factors of 20 or more. Additional organs are implanted throughout the abdominal cavity to produce the specialized enzymes and chemical compounds required for stimulant synthesis and metabolic regulation. These organs, resembling clusters of pulsing biomechanical nodes, operate continuously to maintain the delicate chemical balance that keeps the operative functional. The respiratory system undergoes complete reconstruction to accommodate the increased oxygen demands of enhanced metabolism. The lungs are replaced with synthetic organs that incorporate metallic filtering systems capable of extracting oxygen from virtually any atmospheric composition while filtering out toxins and chemical weapons. The throat receives reinforcement with ceramite plating to protect against damage from the corrosive vapors produced by internal chemical processes. Additional air sacs are implanted throughout the chest cavity to provide emergency oxygen reserves during extended combat operations. Frenzon represents the primary combat stimulant in the Eversor chemical arsenal, a synthetic compound that triggers controlled berserker fury while maintaining tactical awareness necessary for mission completion. The drug affects the brain's limbic system, suppressing fear responses and pain recognition while enhancing aggression and combat reflexes. The chemical structure incorporates synthetic neurotransmitters that flood the brain's reward centers, creating a euphoric state that associates violence with intense pleasure. This psychological conditioning ensures that Eversor operatives actively seek combat situations rather than avoiding them, transforming natural survival instincts into aggressive hunting behaviors. The production of frenzon requires rare chemical precursors harvested from the glands of Terran predators that survived the Age of Strife, specifically the acid-breathing salamanders that inhabit the deepest levels of the Himalaysian cave systems. These creatures produce natural compounds that serve as the foundation for frenzon synthesis, but the extraction process proves extremely dangerous due to the creature's aggressive nature and toxic secretions. The temple maintains specialized hunting teams equipped with protective gear and capture equipment designed to harvest these materials without triggering the creature's defensive responses. Slot serves as the secondary stimulant in the Eversor chemical cocktail, a compound that enhances physical coordination and reaction times while suppressing the body's natural fatigue responses. The drug affects the nervous system's motor control centers, allowing operatives to maintain precise movements and tactical awareness even while under the influence of frenzon's berserker effects. Slot also accelerates the healing process for minor injuries, enabling operatives to continue fighting despite accumulating damage that would incapacitate normal humans. The synthesis of slot requires access to rare fungal specimens found only in the toxic waste zones surrounding Terra's ancient industrial complexes. These organisms, mutated by millennia of exposure to chemical pollutants and radioactive materials, produce alkaloids that serve as the basis for slot production. The harvesting process involves teams of specially trained serfs equipped with environmental suits and detection equipment, as the fungi often grow in areas where atmospheric toxicity exceeds safe exposure limits even for enhanced humans. The temple's proprietary enhancement serums represent the most closely guarded secrets of Eversor bioalchemy, compounds that integrate the various stimulants and metabolic enhancers into a stable mixture that can be administered safely to modified operatives. These serums contain synthetic hormones that regulate the operative's enhanced metabolism, ensuring that the various chemical systems operate in harmony rather than competing for resources or producing toxic interactions. The formulation process requires precise timing and temperature control, as even minor variations in the mixing sequence can produce compounds that are either ineffective or lethal to the recipient. The enhancement serums also incorporate synthetic enzymes that break down the toxic byproducts of stimulant metabolism, preventing the accumulation of chemical waste that would otherwise cause organ failure or neural damage. These enzymes, derived from bacteria found in the most polluted regions of Terra's industrial zones, have been genetically modified to process the specific compounds used in Eversor enhancement. The production of these enzymes requires extensive biotechnological facilities staffed by biologist adepts who specialize in genetic manipulation and biochemical engineering. Eversor deployment protocols begin with the operative's placement in specialized stasis containment systems that maintain their enhanced physiology while preventing the psychological deterioration that would result from extended consciousness. The stasis chambers incorporate multiple layers of life support systems, including intravenous feeding apparatus that delivers nutrients directly to the bloodstream and atmospheric processors that maintain optimal gas mixtures for the operative's modified respiratory system. The chambers also include chemical regulation systems that monitor the operative's stimulant levels and adjust dosages as needed to maintain physiological stability. The containment systems utilize technology derived from Space Marine Dreadnought life support systems. specifically the neural interface protocols that maintain consciousness during extended periods of mechanical integration. The Eversor stasis chambers incorporate similar neural monitoring equipment that tracks the operative's psychological state and prevents the development of sensory deprivation psychosis that would compromise their effectiveness upon activation. The chambers can maintain an operative in stasis for decades if necessary, though extended periods of containment require periodic awakening cycles to prevent permanent psychological damage. Target briefings for Eversor operatives present unique challenges due to their enhanced aggression and reduced capacity for complex reasoning while under the influence of combat stimulants. The briefing process occurs while the operative remains under partial sedation, using specialized neural interface equipment that can implant mission parameters directly into their subconscious mind. The information is encoded as simple behavioral imperatives rather than complex tactical instructions, ensuring that the operative will pursue their designated targets even while experiencing the disorienting effects of frenzon and other combat drugs. The briefing protocols incorporate extensive psychological conditioning that associates specific individuals, locations, or symbols with target designation. The operative's enhanced memory systems, modified through chemical treatment and neural implantation, can retain these associations even while their conscious mind remains focused on immediate combat situations. The conditioning process also includes behavioral triggers that activate specific tactical responses when the operative encounters predetermined environmental conditions or threat patterns. Post-mission termination procedures represent the most controversial aspect of Eversor operations, as the operative's enhanced physiology and psychological conditioning make them unsuitable for extended service or integration into normal Imperial society. The termination process typically occurs automatically through the activation of explosive implants that detonate when the operative's vital signs indicate mission completion or catastrophic injury. These devices, implanted throughout the operative's body during the enhancement process, contain sufficient explosive force to eliminate the operative and destroy any evidence of their modifications or mission parameters. The explosive implants incorporate multiple redundant detonation systems to ensure activation even if the operative suffers severe physical damage during their mission. The primary trigger responds to specific neural patterns associated with mission completion, while secondary systems activate based on predetermined time limits or loss of vital signs. The explosives themselves consist of concentrated plasma charges that vaporize organic matter while leaving minimal forensic evidence, ensuring that the operative's enhanced physiology cannot be studied by enemy forces or unauthorized Imperial personnel. The psychological profile of Eversor candidates emphasizes individuals with existing violent tendencies and reduced capacity for emotional attachment, as these traits prove essential for surviving the radical personality restructuring required for the transformation process. The selection criteria include extensive psychological evaluation to identify candidates with naturally aggressive personalities, histories of violent behavior, and demonstrated ability to function effectively in high-stress combat situations. The Temple's recruiters often target individuals from the most violent underhive gangs, military penal battalions, and death world populations, where extreme violence represents normal survival behavior. The personality restructuring process involves systematic destruction of the candidate's existing psychological frameworks, replacing them with simplified behavioral patterns focused entirely on violence and target elimination. The process begins with chemical treatment that disrupts the formation of new memories while preserving existing combat skills and tactical knowledge. The candidate's emotional responses are systematically suppressed through a combination of surgical intervention and pharmaceutical conditioning, creating individuals who experience pleasure only through acts of violence directed toward their designated targets. The restructuring process also involves the implantation of artificial behavioral constraints that prevent the operative from turning their enhanced aggression against friendly forces or civilians. These constraints, implemented through a combination of neural implants and psychological conditioning, create powerful aversion responses when the operative considers attacking individuals who do not match their target parameters. The constraints operate at a subconscious level, ensuring that they remain effective even when the operative's conscious mind is compromised by combat stimulants or psychological stress. The combat capabilities of fully enhanced Eversor operatives exceed those of most Space Marines in terms of raw physical power and sustained combat effectiveness. The combination of enhanced strength, accelerated reflexes, and chemical-induced berserker fury allows operatives to engage multiple opponents simultaneously while maintaining the tactical awareness necessary to pursue their primary objectives. The operative's enhanced metabolism enables them to fight continuously for hours without experiencing fatigue, while their modified pain responses allow them to continue functioning despite injuries that would incapacitate normal humans. Neuro gauntlets represent the Eversor operative's primary melee weapons, devices that channel the wearer's enhanced neural activity into devastating electrical attacks. The gauntlets incorporate synthetic muscle fibers that amplify the operative's already superhuman strength, while their neural interface systems allow for precise control of electrical discharge patterns. The weapons can generate focused lightning bolts capable of disrupting electronic systems or broad-spectrum electromagnetic pulses that can incapacitate multiple opponents simultaneously. The gauntlet's power source draws energy from the operative's enhanced bioelectric field, creating a symbiotic relationship between weapon and wielder that cannot be replicated by unauthorized users. The devices incorporate adaptive targeting systems that automatically adjust their discharge patterns based on the electrical conductivity and defensive capabilities of their targets. Against unarmored opponents, the gauntlets produce precise neural disruption that causes instant paralysis or death, while heavily armored targets receive broader electromagnetic attacks designed to overwhelm their protective systems. Executioner pistols serve as the Eversor operative's primary ranged weapons, compact firearms that fire specialized ammunition designed to penetrate heavy armor and deliver devastating wounds to organic targets. The pistols incorporate advanced targeting systems that compensate for the operative's chemically enhanced reflexes, ensuring accurate fire even during the disorienting effects of combat stimulant intoxication. The weapon's compact design allows for rapid deployment and maneuverability in close quarters combat situations where larger weapons would prove unwieldy. The Executioner pistol's ammunition selection includes armor-piercing rounds that can penetrate Space Marine power armor, explosive shells that detonate upon impact to maximize tissue damage, and specialized rounds that deliver concentrated toxins or chemical agents. The weapon's magazine systems can accommodate multiple ammunition types simultaneously, allowing operatives to select appropriate rounds based on target characteristics and tactical requirements. The pistol's construction incorporates biorecognition systems that prevent unauthorized use, while allowing the operative to maintain weapon functionality, even while experiencing the disorienting effects of combat enhancement. The Vindicare Temple's training regimen spans 4 decades of relentless conditioning that transforms ordinary humans into instruments of surgical precision, capable of eliminating targets at distances that defy conventional understanding of marksmanship. The process begins with mathematical indoctrination, where candidates spend their first 3 years learning to calculate ballistic trajectories through pure mental computation. These calculations must account for gravitational variations across different planetary bodies, atmospheric density fluctuations, wind patterns at multiple altitudes, and the Coriolis effect created by planetary rotation. Advanced candidates learn to factor in the gravitational influence of nearby celestial bodies, electromagnetic interference from industrial complexes, and even the minute gravitational distortions created by large military vehicles or spacecraft. The mathematical foundation extends beyond simple ballistics to encompass probability theory and statistical analysis that allows operatives to predict target movement patterns based on psychological profiling and behavioral observation. A Vindicare operative studying a target for elimination will spend weeks analyzing their daily routines, identifying patterns in their movements, and calculating the probability of specific behaviors occurring at predetermined times. This analysis includes factors such as the target's preferred walking pace, tendency to pause at specific locations, and likelihood of deviating from established routes based on weather conditions or security concerns. Environmental adaptation training exposes candidates to every conceivable atmospheric condition and gravitational environment found throughout the galaxy. The temple maintains specialized chambers that can replicate the crushing atmospheric pressure of death worlds, the thin air of high-altitude mountain ranges, and the toxic gas compositions found on industrial planets. Candidates learn to compensate for atmospheric refraction that can deflect projectiles by several centimeters over extreme distances, while also developing the physiological adaptations necessary to maintain steady aim despite environmental stresses that would incapacitate normal humans. The gravitational adaptation protocols involve extended periods of training in variable gravity environments, including zero-gravity chambers that simulate void combat conditions and high-gravity centrifuges that replicate the crushing pull of heavy worlds. Candidates must demonstrate their ability to maintain accuracy while experiencing gravitational forces ranging from 0 to 3 times Terra's standard gravity. The training includes exposure to rapidly changing gravitational conditions that might be encountered during orbital bombardment or while operating near massive industrial machinery that creates localized gravitational anomalies. Temperature extremes represent another crucial aspect of environmental conditioning, as Vindicare operatives must maintain their effectiveness in conditions ranging from the frozen wastelands of ice worlds to the scorching heat of forge worlds and volcanic planets. The training involves extended exposure to temperature variations that would prove lethal to unprotected humans, while candidates learn to compensate for the thermal expansion and contraction of their weapons and ammunition. The human body's natural tremors increase significantly in extreme cold, while excessive heat can cause hallucinations and disorientation that compromise accuracy. The development of superhuman patience requires psychological conditioning that fundamentally alters the operative's relationship with time and discomfort. Candidates undergo progressively longer periods of motionless observation, beginning with sessions lasting several hours and gradually extending to weeks of continuous surveillance without movement. The training takes place in environments designed to maximize physical and psychological stress, including positions that create severe muscle fatigue, exposure to insects and parasites, and locations where the operative must remain hidden despite the presence of hostile forces actively searching for intruders. The psychological conditioning involves meditation techniques derived from ancient Terran traditions, combined with chemical treatments that enhance the operative's ability to enter trance-like states while maintaining tactical awareness. These techniques allow Vindicare operatives to slow their metabolic processes to near hibernation levels, reducing their need for food, water, and sleep, while maintaining the mental clarity necessary for precision shooting. The conditioning also includes training in pain suppression that enables operatives to ignore physical discomfort from cramped positions, insect bites, and minor injuries that might otherwise compromise their concentration. Advanced patience training involves scenarios where operatives must maintain their positions despite extreme provocation, including simulated torture of captured allies, false intelligence suggesting mission failure, and psychological warfare designed to break their concentration. The operatives learn to compartmentalize their emotional responses, maintaining focus on their primary objective while ignoring distractions that would cause normal humans to abandon their positions. This training creates individuals capable of watching their own comrades die without moving from their concealed positions if doing so would compromise their mission. The Exodus rifle represents the pinnacle of Imperial marksmanship technology, a weapon system that incorporates targeting computers capable of calculating firing solutions for targets beyond the visual range of unaugmented human eyesight. The rifle's construction utilizes materials and manufacturing techniques that rival those used in Space Marine weapons, with each component precision crafted to tolerances measured in microscopic fractions. The barrel incorporates rare metal alloys that maintain perfect straightness despite temperature variations and mechanical stress, while the internal mechanisms operate with clockwork precision that ensures consistent performance across thousands of shots. The rifle's scope system integrates multiple optical technologies, including traditional magnification lenses, thermal imaging sensors, and electromagnetic spectrum analyzers that can detect targets through various forms of concealment. The targeting computer processes information from all these sources simultaneously, creating a comprehensive tactical picture that identifies potential targets, calculates optimal firing solutions, and predicts target movement patterns. The system can track multiple targets simultaneously while maintaining firing solutions for each, allowing the operative to engage secondary targets if their primary objective becomes unavailable. The Exodus rifle's power source incorporates miniaturized fusion cells that provide consistent energy output for decades of continuous operation. The weapon's internal systems require minimal maintenance, with self-diagnostic routines that identify potential malfunctions before they can affect accuracy. The rifle's construction includes redundant systems for all critical components, ensuring that the weapon remains functional even if individual elements are damaged by enemy fire or environmental hazards. Shield breaker rounds represent the most technologically sophisticated ammunition in the Vindicare arsenal, incorporating miniaturized disruptor field generators that can penetrate energy barriers and personal force fields. The rounds contain microscopic power cells that activate upon firing, creating a localized field distortion that disrupts the molecular bonds maintaining energy shields. The disruptor effect operates for only a few milliseconds, but this proves sufficient to create a temporary breach in most defensive systems. The round's effectiveness varies based on the strength and frequency of the target's shields, with some high-end systems requiring multiple hits to achieve penetration. The manufacturing process for shield breaker rounds requires access to rare materials typically reserved for Space Marine equipment, including adamantium cores and synthetic crystals that can channel disruptor fields without degrading. Each round undergoes individual testing to ensure proper function, as manufacturing defects can cause the disruptor field to activate prematurely or fail to generate sufficient power for shield penetration. The round's complex internal mechanisms make them extremely expensive to produce, limiting their availability to high-priority targets protected by advanced defensive systems. Hellfire rounds contain concentrated acid compounds derived from the digestive systems of Terran predators that survived the Age of Strife, specifically the acid-spitting serpents that inhabit the deepest levels of Hive City foundations. The acid mixture can dissolve through ceramite armor plating within seconds of impact, creating devastating wounds that continue to expand even after the initial penetration. The round's effectiveness against organic targets proves particularly horrific, as the acid destroys nerve endings and blood vessels while preventing natural clotting responses that might limit tissue damage. The production of Hellfire rounds requires specialized containment systems that can handle the corrosive properties of the acid compounds without degrading. The round's casings incorporate multiple layers of protective materials that prevent the acid from eating through the ammunition before firing, while internal mechanisms ensure proper dispersal upon impact. The manufacturing process proves extremely dangerous, as exposure to the acid compounds can cause permanent injury or death even in microscopic quantities. Turbo-penetrator rounds utilize dense metal cores and shaped charge warheads designed to defeat the heaviest armor protection available to Imperial enemies. The rounds incorporate depleted uranium penetrators that maintain their structural integrity while punching through multiple layers of armor plating. The shaped charge component creates a focused explosion that channels the blast energy into a narrow cone, maximizing penetration while minimizing collateral damage to surrounding areas. The turbo penetrator design proves particularly effective against vehicle armor and fortified positions, as the rounds can penetrate through multiple layers of protection to reach vital components or personnel within. The round's construction includes delayed fuse mechanisms that allow them to penetrate armor before detonating, ensuring maximum damage to internal systems. The penetrator's uranium cores provide additional lethality through radioactive contamination that can incapacitate targets even if the initial impact proves non-fatal. Specialized anti-materiel rounds encompass a variety of ammunition types designed to destroy specific equipment or infrastructure targets. These include electromagnetic pulse rounds that can disable electronic systems, thermite rounds that can melt through metal components, and viral rounds that contain machine code viruses capable of corrupting enemy computer systems. Each ammunition type requires different manufacturing techniques and incorporates unique materials that determine their effectiveness against specific target categories. The anti-materiel rounds development reflects the diverse range of targets that Vindicare operatives must engage, from simple mechanical devices to sophisticated cogitator systems that control planetary defense networks. The round's effectiveness depends on precise targeting of vulnerable components, requiring operatives to possess detailed knowledge of their target's internal systems and structural weaknesses. The ammunition's specialized nature means that operatives must carefully select appropriate rounds based on intelligence assessments of their target's protective measures and construction materials. Notable Vindicare operations include the elimination of the Chaos Sorcerer Malachar the Twisted during the Siege of Vrax, where the operative maintained position for 6 weeks while waiting for the target to expose himself during a demonic summoning ritual. The shot, taken from a distance of 12 kilometers through the toxic atmosphere of the war-torn world, required calculations that accounted for atmospheric distortion caused by chemical weapons and the gravitational anomalies created by warp rifts. The sorcerer's death occurred at the crucial moment of the summoning, causing the ritual to collapse and banishing the emerging demon back to the warp. The assassination of ethereal Onal Emyen during the Damocles Gulf Crusade demonstrated the Vindicare Temple's ability to eliminate targets protected by advanced alien technology. The operative spent 3 months studying Tau defensive protocols and shield technology before identifying a brief vulnerability in the ethereal's protection during ceremonial appearances. The shot penetrated the ethereal's drone shield through a gap that existed for less than 2 seconds, eliminating a target whose death caused the collapse of an entire Tau cadre's command structure. The elimination of Warboss Scarfang during the Armageddon campaigns required the operative to account for the chaotic nature of Orc society and the unpredictable behavior patterns of their leadership. The operative established multiple firing positions around the Orc stronghold, calculating probability matrices for the Warboss's appearance at various locations. The successful shot occurred during a massive Orc gathering where Scarfang was challenging rivals for leadership, the bullet penetrating his crude armor and causing an explosion in his personal ammunition supplies that eliminated several other Orc leaders simultaneously. Vindicare camouflage techniques extend far beyond simple visual concealment, encompassing comprehensive sensory deception that can fool even enhanced detection systems. The operatives learn to construct hides that mask their thermal signature, electromagnetic emissions, and chemical traces that might be detected by enemy sensors. These positions incorporate materials that absorb or deflect various forms of scanning energy, while providing the structural support necessary for extended occupation. The construction of effective hides requires detailed knowledge of local materials and environmental conditions, as operatives must create concealment that appears natural within the surrounding terrain. The process involves careful selection of construction materials that will not degrade over time or emit detectable odors that might alert enemy forces. Advanced hides incorporate ventilation systems that prevent the buildup of carbon dioxide and other gases that could reveal the operative's presence to atmospheric sensors. The psychological conditioning required to resist torture involves systematic exposure to various forms of physical and mental abuse designed to test the operative's ability to maintain operational security under extreme duress. The training includes exposure to pain-inducing drugs, sensory deprivation, and psychological manipulation techniques that might be employed by enemy interrogators. The operatives learn to compartmentalize their knowledge, maintaining access to information necessary for mission completion, while creating mental barriers that protect sensitive intelligence about temple operations and personnel. The conditioning process creates multiple layers of false memories and fabricated personal histories that can be revealed under interrogation without compromising actual operational security. These false narratives include detailed background information that can withstand casual investigation while directing enemy attention away from the operative's true origins and training. The psychological frameworks developed during this conditioning often result in permanent personality changes that make it difficult for operatives to form normal social relationships even after completing their service. The recruitment of psychic blanks represents one of the most challenging aspects of the Officio Assassinorum's operations, as these individuals occur with a frequency of approximately 1 in 10 million births across the human population. The Temple's recruitment networks span the entire galaxy, utilizing specialized detection equipment and trained personnel to identify potential candidates among the vast populations of Imperial worlds. The process begins with planetary census data analysis, where administratum records are cross-referenced with reports of unexplained psychological disturbances, infant mortality spikes in specific regions, and patterns of social isolation that might indicate the presence of a psychic null. The initial identification process relies on the distinctive psychological effects that blanks produce in their immediate vicinity. Newborn blanks cause severe postpartum depression in their mothers, often leading to abandonment or infanticide as the natural maternal bonding process fails completely. Hospital records from across the Imperium document cases of nursing staff experiencing panic attacks, nausea, and overwhelming dread when handling specific infants, though the medical personnel typically attribute these reactions to stress or contamination rather than psychic phenomena. The Temple's recruitment agents monitor these reports, dispatching investigation teams to examine potential candidates before they can be eliminated by their own families or communities. The testing procedures for null gene carriers involve exposure to controlled psychic stimuli that would produce measurable responses in normal humans while having no effect on genuine blanks. The primary test utilizes sanctioned psykers operating under carefully controlled conditions, as their presence causes immediate and severe discomfort in most humans while producing no reaction whatsoever in psychic nulls. The testing chamber incorporates multiple layers of psychic shielding to prevent the blank's null field from interfering with the psyker's abilities, while monitoring equipment records the physiological responses of both subjects during the encounter. Advanced testing protocols involve exposure to minor warp entities contained within specialized containment systems that prevent their escape while allowing their psychic emanations to affect nearby subjects. Normal humans experience terror, hallucinations, and physical revulsion when exposed to these entities, while blanks remain completely unaffected by their presence. The most definitive test involves direct contact with psychically active artifacts, including minor chaos relics and Xeno's psychic devices that produce immediate corruption effects in normal humans. Blanks can handle these objects without experiencing any negative effects, though the artifacts themselves often become inert or malfunction when exposed to the null field. The rarity of suitable candidates creates enormous logistical challenges for the Temple's recruitment operations. Search teams must investigate thousands of false leads for every genuine blank they identify, as many psychological conditions can mimic the effects of psychic nullification. The teams operate under deep cover identities, typically posing as medical researchers or social workers investigating developmental disorders in children. The recruitment process must be completed quickly once a genuine blank is identified, as these individuals rarely survive to adulthood without intervention due to the social isolation and psychological trauma they experience. The extraction protocols for confirmed blanks require specialized equipment and procedures designed to minimize the psychological impact on the candidate and their family. The Temple's agents utilize memory modification techniques to implant false memories of the child's death or disappearance, preventing family members from searching for their missing relative. The extraction teams include medical personnel equipped with specialized life support systems that can maintain the blank's physiological functions during transport, as the stress of removal from familiar environments can cause severe psychological trauma that might compromise their future development. The transportation of blank candidates presents unique challenges due to their effect on normal humans. The Temple maintains specially modified spacecraft equipped with automated systems that can function without human crew members, as prolonged exposure to a blank's null field causes severe psychological disturbance in unprotected individuals. The vessels incorporate multiple layers of psychic shielding designed to contain the null field while providing life support for the candidate during extended voyages. The automated systems include medical monitoring equipment that can detect and respond to physiological crises without requiring human intervention. The Animus Speculum represents the most sophisticated piece of equipment in the Culexus arsenal, a device that transforms the operative's natural psychic null field into a focused weapon capable of devastating psychic entities and individuals. The device resembles a stylized skull mask crafted from materials that exist partially in normal space and partially within the warp, allowing it to channel psychic energy while remaining immune to the disruptive effects of the null field. The construction process requires rare minerals found only in the deepest regions of Terra's crust, specifically crystalline formations that have been exposed to concentrated warp energy over millennia without becoming corrupted. The speculum's internal mechanisms incorporate fragments of psychically active crystals that resonate with the wearer's null field, amplifying its effects and directing them towards specific targets. The device's most crucial component is a lens system crafted from materials harvested from the eye of Terra's periphery, where the boundary between real space and the warp creates unique crystalline structures with properties that cannot be replicated through conventional manufacturing. These lenses focus the null field into a concentrated beam that can disrupt psychic phenomena at ranges exceeding several hundred meters. The integration process between operative and speculum involves surgical implantation of neural interface systems that allow direct mental control of the device's functions. The implants create a symbiotic relationship between the operative's nervous system and the speculum's targeting mechanisms, enabling precise control of the null field's intensity and focus. The procedure requires extensive preparation, as the operative's enhanced null field can interfere with the surgical equipment and life support systems used during the operation. The surgery itself must be performed by specially trained biologist adepts who have undergone conditioning to resist the psychological effects of prolonged exposure to psychic nulls. The speculum's operation draws power from the operative's own life force, creating a feedback loop that can prove fatal if the device is used at maximum intensity for extended periods. The energy drain manifests as rapid aging, cellular degeneration, and eventual death as the operative's biological systems are consumed to fuel the device's psychic disruption capabilities. The Temple's medical staff monitor each operative's vital signs continuously, calculating the maximum safe usage time for the speculum based on the individual's physical condition and the intensity of their null field. The weapon's effectiveness varies significantly based on the psychic strength of its targets. Minor psykers and individuals with limited psychic abilities typically suffer immediate unconsciousness or death when exposed to the speculum's focused null field. More powerful psykers can resist the initial effects but experience severe psychological trauma that permanently damages their ability to access the warp. The most powerful psykers, including chaos sorcerers and Xenos psychic entities, require sustained exposure to the null field to achieve complete elimination, often resulting in the operative's death from energy drain. The deployment protocols for Culexus operatives against psyker threats require careful coordination with other Imperial forces, as the operative's null field can interfere with friendly psykers and psychically sensitive equipment. The briefing process involves detailed analysis of the target's psychic abilities, defensive measures, and likely responses to null field exposure. The operative receives tactical guidance about optimal positioning and timing for speculum activation, as premature use can alert the target to their presence, while delayed activation might allow the psyker to escape or summon reinforcements. Operations against rogue-sanctioned psykers present unique challenges, as these individuals possess extensive training in psychic combat and defensive techniques that can partially mitigate the effects of null field exposure. The Culexus operative must typically approach within close range to ensure effective speculum deployment, requiring infiltration skills that rival those of Callidus operatives. The approach phase involves careful study of the target's daily routines and security measures, identifying opportunities for close contact without alerting the psyker to the operative's presence. The elimination of demon-possessed individuals requires different tactical approaches, as the possessing entity often maintains some connection to the warp even when exposed to null field effects. The Culexus operative must sustain speculum activation for extended periods to sever the demon's connection to its host, often resulting in the complete destruction of both entities. The process proves extremely dangerous, as wounded demons can become desperate and unpredictable, potentially causing massive collateral damage in their death throes. Chaos sorcerers represent the most challenging targets for Culexus operatives, as these individuals possess decades or centuries of experience in psychic combat and often maintain protective wards that can partially deflect null field effects. The approach requires extensive intelligence gathering about the sorcerer's abilities, preferred spells, and defensive measures. The operative must often eliminate the sorcerer's cultist followers and protective rituals before attempting direct confrontation, as these secondary targets can interfere with speculum effectiveness or provide the sorcerer with additional psychic energy to resist the null field. The psychological impact of Culexus operatives on normal humans extends far beyond simple discomfort, encompassing a primal terror that affects individuals at the deepest levels of their consciousness. The null field disrupts the subtle psychic connections that exist between all living beings, creating a sensation of complete isolation and existential dread that can drive witnesses to madness. Normal humans exposed to a Culexus operative experience symptoms, including severe anxiety, panic attacks, uncontrollable trembling, and overwhelming urges to flee the area regardless of tactical considerations or personal safety. The effect proves particularly pronounced among individuals with latent psychic abilities, as their enhanced sensitivity to psychic phenomena makes them more susceptible to the disruptive effects of the null field. These individuals often experience temporary blindness, hearing loss, or complete sensory shutdown when exposed to a Culexus operative's presence. The psychological trauma can persist for months or years after the encounter, manifesting as chronic nightmares, phobias, and inability to function in situations that remind the victim of their exposure to the null field. Imperial Guard regiments that have operated alongside Culexus operatives report significant morale problems and discipline issues that persist long after the mission's completion. Soldiers describe feeling watched by death itself and experiencing overwhelming certainty that they are about to die, regardless of the actual tactical situation. The effect proves so disruptive that many commanders refuse to deploy Culexus operatives alongside conventional forces, preferring to coordinate their operations through remote communication systems that minimize direct contact. Space Marines demonstrate greater resistance to the psychological effects of Culexus operatives due to their enhanced mental conditioning and psychic shielding, but even Astartes warriors report significant discomfort when operating in close proximity to these assassins. The Space Marines' enhanced senses actually make them more aware of the null field's presence, creating a constant awareness of wrongness that can interfere with their combat effectiveness. chapter records document cases of veteran sergeants refusing to work with Culexus operatives after experiencing the psychological effects of prolonged exposure. The terror inspired by Culexus operatives among Imperial forces creates significant operational challenges for mission planners, as conventional support personnel often refuse to provide logistical assistance or transportation services. The operatives must typically rely on automated systems and remote handling equipment to maintain their equipment and receive mission briefings. Communication with command personnel occurs through intermediaries who can tolerate brief exposure to the null field, though these individuals require extensive psychological conditioning and regular rotation to prevent permanent mental damage. The temple's training facilities incorporate specialized architecture designed to contain and channel the null field effects while protecting essential personnel from psychological damage. The buildings utilize geometric patterns and construction materials that help focus psychic energy away from sensitive areas, while automated systems handle most routine maintenance and support functions. The few human personnel who work within the facility undergo extensive conditioning that includes gradual exposure to null field effects and psychological reinforcement techniques that help them maintain their sanity despite prolonged contact with the operatives. The selection criteria for temple support staff emphasize individuals with naturally low psychic sensitivity and strong mental discipline, as these traits provide some protection against the disruptive effects of null field exposure. The staff members receive specialized training in meditation techniques and mental shielding that can partially mitigate the psychological impact of working with Culexus operatives. Even with these precautions, the average service life for temple personnel rarely exceeds 5 years, as prolonged exposure to null field effects causes permanent psychological damage that makes continued service impossible. The deployment of Culexus operatives often requires careful coordination with inquisitorial forces, as many inquisitors possess psychic abilities that can be disrupted by the operative's presence. The protocols governing these joint operations establish strict guidelines for maintaining safe distances between the Culexus operative and friendly psykers, while ensuring that the operative can still engage their designated targets effectively. The coordination process typically involves detailed tactical planning that accounts for the null field's effects on all personnel and equipment in the operational area. The Venenum Temple operated from a sprawling complex hidden beneath the Terran Sahara, its laboratories carved into bedrock that had been sterilized by millennia of radiation exposure. The facility's architecture reflected its deadly purpose, with corridors lined with containment cells housing the galaxy's most virulent organisms and chambers where bioalchemists worked behind multiple layers of protective barriers. The air itself carried the subtle chemical tang of preservation compounds and neutralizing agents, while servo skulls equipped with atmospheric processors constantly monitored for trace toxins that might escape containment protocols. The temple's primary research facilities contain specimens gathered from across the galaxy, each one representing a potential weapon in the hands of a skilled assassin. Terran death adders provided venom that could paralyze a space marine within minutes, while fungal spores from Catachon's jungle floor could induce hallucinations so severe that victims would tear themselves apart in their delirium. The most prized specimens came from worlds touched by chaos corruption, where natural toxins had been twisted by warp exposure into compounds that could bypass even the most sophisticated biological defenses. Venenum operatives underwent extensive physiological modification to survive constant exposure to the deadly substances they wielded. Their digestive systems received synthetic linings that could neutralize most known toxins, while their circulatory systems incorporated specialized filters that prevented poisonous compounds from reaching vital organs. The most radical modification involved the replacement of their natural liver with a biomechanical organ capable of processing toxins at rates that would overwhelm normal human physiology. These enhanced operatives could consume lethal doses of poison without experiencing adverse effects, allowing them to test their creations through direct ingestion. The creation of species-specific toxins represented the pinnacle of venom bioalchemy, requiring detailed knowledge of alien physiology and biochemistry that few humans possessed. Tau physiology proved particularly vulnerable to compounds derived from Terran heavy metals, as their evolutionary history lacked exposure to the toxic elements that had shaped human development. Eldar biochemistry presented greater challenges due to their advanced understanding of toxicology, but their extended lifespans created vulnerabilities in their cellular regeneration processes that could be exploited by carefully designed compounds. Orc physiology required entirely different approaches, as their robust constitution and natural resistance to toxins made conventional poisons ineffective. Venom researchers discovered that compounds affecting the orc digestive system could prove devastating, as their enormous appetites and indiscriminate eating habits made them vulnerable to toxins that could be introduced through food sources. The most effective anti-orc compounds targeted the fungal symbiotes that comprised part of their digestive system, causing massive internal infections that would spread throughout orc populations through their natural spore-based reproduction. The development of undetectable delivery systems required extensive research into the behavioral patterns and cultural practices of target species. Human targets could be reached through contaminated food, poisoned writing materials, or toxic compounds absorbed through skin contact during seemingly innocent social interactions. The operatives studied regional cuisines, social customs, and personal habits that might provide opportunities for toxin delivery without arousing suspicion. A planetary governor's preference for exotic wines might provide the perfect vector for a slow-acting poison that would manifest symptoms weeks after consumption. Tyrannid biotoxins presented unique opportunities for venom researchers, as these organisms produced compounds specifically designed to break down organic matter for consumption. The temple's bioalchemists learned to harvest and modify these substances, creating weapons that could dissolve armor, flesh, and bone with equal efficiency. The most potent derivatives could reduce a human body to organic slurry within minutes, leaving no trace of the victim's identity or cause of death. However, working with tyrannid specimens required extreme caution, as their adaptive biology meant that even dead tissue could continue to evolve and develop new defensive mechanisms. The Venom Temple's most notorious achievement involved the development of the heretics toxin, a compound specifically designed to target the enhanced physiology of space marines. The creation process required samples of Astartes' genetic material, obtained through careful analysis of battlefield casualties and surgical waste from chapter apothecaries. The toxin attacked the unique organs that distinguished space marines from normal humans, causing their enhanced metabolism to turn against itself as their bodies attempted to process the foreign compound. The heretics toxin proved particularly effective against the Becher's gland, the organ that allowed space marines to spit corrosive acid. The compound caused the gland to produce increasingly powerful acids that would eventually burn through the marine's own throat and digestive system. The process took several hours to complete, during which the victim would experience excruciating pain while remaining conscious and aware of their deteriorating condition. The toxin's delayed action allowed venom operatives to deliver the compound and escape before the target realized they had been poisoned. Chaos Space Marines presented different challenges for venom researchers, as their corruption by warp energies often granted them immunity to conventional toxins. The Temple's bioalchemists discovered that compounds incorporating blessed materials could affect Chaos Marines despite their supernatural resistance. Holy water blessed by the Ecclesiarchy, when combined with specific organic compounds, created toxins that could disrupt the warp energies sustaining Chaos Marines. The resulting compounds proved extremely difficult to produce, requiring cooperation between the temple and various imperial religious orders who provided the necessary blessed materials. The Vanus Temple operated from a facility hidden within the sprawling administrative complex of the Terran Sanatorium, its external appearance indistinguishable from the countless bureaucratic offices that surrounded it. The temple's true nature became apparent only within its heavily shielded interior chambers, where walls lined with cogitator banks processed information streams from across the galaxy. The facility's most impressive feature was the central data core, a massive computational matrix that could analyze communication patterns, economic trends, and political relationships to identify targets whose elimination would create maximum strategic advantage. Vannis operatives specialized in information warfare that extended far beyond simple intelligence gathering, encompassing the systematic manipulation of data networks and communication systems that controlled imperial society. These assassins possessed an intimate understanding of bureaucratic procedures, legal frameworks, and administrative protocols that govern the Imperium's vast machinery. Their training emphasized the subtle art of document forgery, data manipulation, and the creation of false records that could alter the course of entire campaigns through carefully placed misinformation. The Temple's data analysts worked constantly to identify individuals whose deaths would create cascading effects throughout Imperial society. A single corrupt administrator might control supply lines that fed dozens of worlds, making their elimination more strategically valuable than the assassination of a planetary governor. The Vannis operatives studied these complex webs of influence and dependency, mapping the relationships between key individuals and institutions that kept the Imperium functioning. Their targets were often obscure bureaucrats whose names appeared in no history books, but whose deaths could trigger economic collapse or military disaster. Communication interception represented one of the Vannis Temple's most valuable capabilities, as their operatives could monitor and manipulate the information flows that connected Imperial worlds across the galaxy. The Temple maintained listening posts throughout the Imperium, hidden within astropathic relay stations and communication hubs where they could intercept sensitive transmissions without detection. These facilities incorporated advanced cogitator systems that could decode encrypted messages, analyze communication patterns, and identify strategic intelligence that might reveal enemy intentions or Imperial vulnerabilities. The manipulation of astropathic communications required operatives with limited psychic abilities, individuals who could influence the telepathic messages transmitted between worlds without possessing the full psychic potential that would make them suitable for other Imperial services. These operatives underwent specialized training that enhanced their natural psychic sensitivity while teaching them to remain undetected by sanctioned psykers and astropathic monitoring systems. Their abilities allowed them to subtly alter transmitted messages, introducing small changes that could have enormous consequences when amplified through the Imperium's vast communication networks. Political assassination represented the most sophisticated aspect of Vannis operations, as these eliminations required careful orchestration of social and economic forces rather than direct violence. The operatives studied the complex relationships between Imperial nobles, military commanders, and administrative officials, identifying opportunities to manipulate these relationships for strategic advantage. A carefully timed revelation of corruption might destroy a planetary governor's credibility, while fabricated evidence of heresy could trigger an inquisitorial investigation that would eliminate entire power structures. The Vannis Temple's most successful operations involved the manipulation of succession crises within Imperial noble houses, where the death of a key individual could trigger civil wars that would consume entire sectors. The operatives studied genealogical records, marriage contracts, and inheritance laws to identify potential successors whose claims to power might be disputed. They then orchestrated the elimination of specific individuals whose deaths would create maximum confusion and conflict among the surviving claimants. The resulting civil wars would weaken Imperial enemies while providing opportunities for more loyal nobles to assume power. Economic warfare formed another crucial aspect of Vannis operations, as the Temple's operatives understood that financial systems could be more devastating weapons than any physical armament. They studied trade routes, currency exchanges, and resource distribution networks that sustained Imperial worlds, identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited through targeted assassinations. The death of a key merchant guild leader might disrupt supply lines that fed entire sectors, while the elimination of a banking official could trigger financial collapses that would cripple enemy war efforts. The integration of Venom and Vanus operatives with the four primary temples required careful coordination to ensure that their specialized capabilities complemented rather than conflicted with ongoing operations. Joint missions typically involved Vanus operatives providing intelligence support and logistical coordination, while Venom specialists supplied specialized toxins or biological weapons tailored to specific targets. The collaboration between these temples created assassination capabilities that exceeded the sum of their individual parts, allowing for complex operations that combined multiple assassination disciplines. The Siege of Vrax demonstrated the effectiveness of integrated temple operations, as Vanus operatives provided detailed intelligence about Chaos cult leadership, while Venom specialists developed toxins specifically designed to affect Chaos-corrupted humans. The operation required months of preparation, as the operatives had to infiltrate the planet's communication networks and identify the cult's command structure, while simultaneously developing biological weapons that could penetrate the cultists' warp-enhanced defenses. The coordinated assault eliminated the cult's leadership within hours, causing the collapse of their resistance and saving countless Imperial lives. The Badab War provided another example of successful temple integration, as Vanus operatives manipulated communication networks to isolate the rebel Space Marine chapters, while Venom specialists developed toxins that could affect Astartes' physiology. The operation required unprecedented cooperation between the temples, as the rebels' enhanced security measures and military expertise made conventional assassination approaches ineffective. The combined assault utilized information warfare to create confusion and mistrust among the rebel forces, while biological weapons eliminated key leaders who might have maintained unity among the disparate factions. The decline of the Venom and Vanus temples began during the Age of Apostasy, as the political upheavals and religious conflicts of that period created operational environments that favored more direct assassination methods over the subtle approaches favored by these specialized temples. The Reign of Blood created a climate of paranoia and suspicion that made the careful intelligence gathering and long-term planning required for Venom and Vanus operations increasingly difficult. The political instability also disrupted the supply chains and communication networks that these temples required for their specialized operations. Sebastian Thor's reforms following the Age of Apostasy included extensive reorganization of imperial institutions, with particular attention to organizations that possessed capabilities that could threaten the stability of the Imperium itself. The Venom Temple's biological weapons and the Vanus Temple's information warfare capabilities represented potential threats to Imperial security if they fell into the wrong hands. The reforms included new oversight mechanisms and security protocols that limited the temple's operational autonomy while requiring greater accountability to imperial authorities. The suspected dissolution of these temples remains a closely guarded secret within the Officio Assassinorum, with conflicting reports about their current operational status. Some sources suggest that the temples were formally disbanded during the 36th millennium, with their personnel and resources redistributed among the four primary temples. Other reports indicate that the temples continue to operate in a reduced capacity, maintaining small cadres of specialists who provide support services to the primary assassination disciplines when required. The current operational status of the Venom and Vanus temples remains deliberately ambiguous, as the Officio Assassinorum benefits from uncertainty about their capabilities and activities. Enemy forces must plan for the possibility that these specialized assassination disciplines remain active, requiring additional resources and security measures that might otherwise be deployed against more conventional threats. The ambiguity also provides the Officio Assassinorum with operational flexibility, allowing them to deploy remaining specialists from these temples when circumstances require their unique capabilities. Modern imperial records contain no official acknowledgement of the Venenum and Vanus temples' existence, with their historical activities attributed to other imperial organizations or classified as natural disasters and political upheavals. The systematic erasure of these temples from official histories represents one of the most successful information warfare operations in imperial history, demonstrating the effectiveness of the techniques that these organizations developed during their active periods. The absence of official records ensures that potential enemies cannot study the temple's methods or develop countermeasures against their specialized assassination techniques. The deployment of assassins against Warmaster Horus represented one of the most catastrophic miscalculations in imperial history, transforming what should have been a surgical strike into a galaxy-spanning conflict that would consume the Officio Assassinorum from within. The operation originated from desperate councils held deep within the imperial palace as reports of Horus's rebellion reached Terra, where the emperor's closest advisors struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal. Malcador the Sigillite, understanding the strategic implications of allowing a Primarch to lead a rebellion against the Imperium, authorized the deployment of multiple assassination teams with the explicit goal of eliminating the Warmaster before his corruption could spread to other legions. The planning phase required unprecedented coordination between the four primary temples, as the target's enhanced physiology and military genius demanded a multifaceted approach that could overcome both his personal defenses and the protection provided by his legion. Vindicare operatives studied detailed anatomical data about Primarch physiology, calculating firing solutions that could penetrate the advanced armor systems that protected these genetically enhanced beings. Callidus specialists analyzed intelligence reports about Horus's personal habits and trusted associates, identifying potential infiltration opportunities within his inner circle. Eversor bioalchemists worked frantically to develop enhanced combat stimulants that might allow their operatives to match a Primarch's superhuman combat capabilities. The Culexus temple faced unique challenges in preparing for operations against Horus, as the Warmaster's exposure to chaos corruption had fundamentally altered his relationship with psychic phenomena. Intelligence reports suggested that Horus had begun manifesting abilities that transcended normal human psychic potential, requiring the temple's specialists to develop new techniques for combating entities that existed partially within the warp. The Animus Speculum underwent extensive modifications to handle the increased psychic output required for engaging chaos-corrupted targets, while the operatives themselves received additional conditioning to resist the corrupting influence of prolonged exposure to warp energies. The first assassination attempt occurred during the Istvan III campaign, where a Callidus operative had successfully infiltrated the Sons of Horus command structure by assuming the identity of a senior logistics officer. The operative, whose true name remains classified in temple records, had spent months establishing their cover identity and gaining access to the Warmaster's personal staff. The plan required the operative to introduce a sophisticated toxin into Horus's food supply during a victory celebration following the planet's compliance, using a compound specifically designed to target Primarch physiology while mimicking the symptoms of a rare genetic disorder. The operation's failure resulted not from any flaw in the operative's training or equipment, but from the fundamental changes that chaos corruption had wrought in Horus's biology. The toxin, which should have caused rapid cellular breakdown and organ failure, instead triggered a violent psychic backlash that revealed the operative's presence to the Warmaster. The polymorphine coursing through the assassin system began to boil within their bloodstream, as Horus's newly awakened psychic abilities disrupted the compound's molecular structure. The operatives' death throes lasted for several minutes, during which their body underwent horrific transformations that revealed the true nature of their mission to everyone present. Horus's reaction to the assassination attempt exceeded even the most pessimistic projections of the temple's strategic planners. Rather than simply increasing his personal security measures, the Warmaster interpreted the attack as evidence of a broader conspiracy within the Imperium's administrative apparatus. His response involved systematic purges of suspected loyalists throughout the rebellious legions, combined with the deployment of his own agents to identify and eliminate Imperial assassination networks. The War Master's intelligence operations, led by former members of the Alpha Legion who possessed intimate knowledge of covert warfare techniques, proved devastatingly effective against the Officio Assassinorum's carefully constructed operational security. The second assassination attempt utilized a Vindicare operative positioned within the ruins of Istvan V, where the War Master was expected to survey the aftermath of the drop site massacre. The operative had established a firing position among the wreckage of Loyalist drop pods, using the scattered debris to create camouflage that would conceal their presence from the enhanced senses of the traitor Primarchs. The shot, calculated to penetrate Horus's modified Terminator armor at a range of 3 kilometers, utilized a specialized turbo-penetrator round incorporating fragments of weapons-grade adamantium harvested from the Imperial Palace's own defensive systems. The operative's elimination of several Sons of Horus officers during the approach phase demonstrated the effectiveness of their training and equipment, as each shot found its target despite the chaotic conditions of the battlefield. However, the primary target proved far more elusive than intelligence reports had suggested. Horus's movements displayed an almost supernatural awareness of potential threats, as if the Chaos Gods themselves were warning him of approaching danger. The War Master's enhanced reflexes, augmented by his growing connection to the warp, allowed him to detect the incoming projectile and adjust his position fractionally, causing the round to impact his shoulder pauldron rather than penetrating his helmet's eye lens. The failed shot's impact against Horus's armor produced a distinctive sound that immediately alerted the traitor forces to the operative's presence. The War Master's response demonstrated both his tactical genius and his growing inhumanity, as he directed his forces to systematically destroy every piece of cover within a 5-kilometer radius, while he personally stalked the assassin through the ruins. The operative's death occurred after a running battle that lasted several hours, during which they managed to eliminate dozens of traitor space marines before succumbing to wounds inflicted by Horus himself. The War Master's personal involvement in the hunt revealed the psychological impact that the assassination attempts were having on his increasingly paranoid mindset. The third attempt involved an Eversor operative deployed during the siege of the Precentor's palace on Istvan III, where Loyalist forces were making their final stand against the traitor legions. The operative's insertion occurred through a modified drop pod that had been disguised as debris from the orbital bombardment, allowing them to reach the planet's surface without detection by the traitor fleet's sensors. The mission parameters required the operative to eliminate Horus during his expected inspection of the siege lines, using the chaos of urban combat to mask their approach and provide cover for their escape. The Eversor operative's enhanced physiology and combat stimulants allowed them to carve through the traitor forces with devastating efficiency, creating a path of destruction that extended for several city blocks before reaching the War Master's position. The operative's neuro-gauntlets proved particularly effective against the Sons of Horus, as their electrical discharge could disrupt the power systems of Space Marine armor while causing massive trauma to the enhanced nervous systems of the Astartes warriors. The sight of a single human warrior destroying entire squads of traitor Marines created panic among the rebel forces, who had never encountered an opponent capable of matching their superhuman capabilities. The confrontation between the Eversor operative and Horus lasted only minutes, but the psychological impact of the encounter would influence the War Master's behavior for the remainder of the heresy. The operative's enhanced reflexes and chemical-induced berserker fury allowed them to land several significant hits against the Primarch, including a neuro-gauntlet strike that temporarily disrupted his armor's power systems. However, Horus's own combat abilities, enhanced by his growing connection to the Chaos Gods, ultimately proved superior to the operative's artificial enhancements. The War Master's killing blow involved the use of psychic powers that literally tore the operative apart at the molecular level, demonstrating capabilities that transcended anything in the Imperial understanding of Primarch abilities. The failure of 3 consecutive assassination attempts triggered a crisis of confidence within the Officio Assassinorum that would have far-reaching consequences for the organization's future operations. The Temple Masters convened an emergency session to analyze the failures and develop new strategies for dealing with chaos-corrupted targets. The discussions revealed fundamental disagreements about the nature of the threat posed by Horus and the appropriate response to his apparent invulnerability to conventional assassination techniques. These disagreements would eventually evolve into the factional conflicts that would tear the organization apart during the Assassins' War. The Callidus Temple Master advocated for a more subtle approach that would target Horus's key supporters and allies rather than attempting direct elimination of the War Master himself. This strategy emphasized the systematic elimination of traitor legion officers, corrupted Imperial officials, and chaos cultists who provided essential support for the rebellion. The Temple Master argued that removing these supporting elements would isolate Horus and make him vulnerable to future assassination attempts, while also disrupting the logistical networks that sustain the traitor forces. The Vindicare Temple Master proposed the development of specialized ammunition incorporating blessed materials and psychically active compounds that might prove effective against chaos-corrupted targets. This approach required extensive cooperation with the Adeptus Mechanicus and various imperial religious orders, as the materials involved were extremely rare and difficult to obtain. The Temple Master's proposals included the creation of bullets blessed by the Emperor himself, projectiles incorporating fragments of the Golden Throne, and ammunition containing concentrated psychic energy harvested from sanctioned psykers. The Eversor Temple Master argued for a more aggressive approach that would deploy multiple operatives simultaneously against Horus and his closest allies. This strategy acknowledged the likelihood that individual operatives would not survive their missions, but calculated that the cumulative damage inflicted by multiple assassination attempts might prove sufficient to eliminate the target. The Temple Master's proposals included the development of new combat stimulants that would enhance operative effectiveness even further, possibly at the cost of reducing their operational lifespan to mere hours. The Culexus Temple Master presented the most radical proposal, suggesting that the organization should focus its efforts on combating the chaos corruption that had transformed Horus rather than attempting to eliminate the Primarch through conventional means. This approach would require the development of new techniques for combating warp entities and the creation of specialized equipment that could disrupt the connection between chaos gods and their mortal servants. The Temple Master argued that success in this area would not only neutralize Horus, but also provide the Imperium with weapons that could be used against other chaos-corrupted enemies. The deadlock between the Temple Masters created an opportunity for external forces to manipulate the Officio Assassinorum's internal politics. Intelligence reports from this period suggest that agents working for various factions within the imperial hierarchy began approaching individual Temple Masters with offers of support and resources in exchange for their cooperation in eliminating specific targets. These negotiations occurred in secret, with each Temple Master believing that they were acting in the best interests of the Imperium while actually advancing the agendas of their hidden sponsors. The situation deteriorated further when reports reached Terra suggesting that some members of the Officio Assassinorum had been corrupted by chaos influence and were actively working to sabotage Imperial operations. These reports, whose accuracy remains disputed, claim that traitor operatives had infiltrated the organization at the highest levels and were providing intelligence to Horus's forces while undermining legitimate assassination missions. The paranoia generated by these accusations created an atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust that made effective coordination between the temples increasingly difficult. The formal declaration of the Assassins' War occurred when the Callidus Temple Master accused the Eversor Temple Master of harboring traitor operatives within their organization. The accusation was based on intelligence reports suggesting that several failed assassination attempts had been compromised by advance warning provided to the targets. The Eversor Temple Master's response involved counter-accusations that the Callidus Temple had been infiltrated by shape-shifting chaos cultists who were using their polymorphine abilities to impersonate loyal operatives while conducting sabotage operations. The initial violence erupted during a joint training exercise at a facility located in the Urals, where operatives from multiple temples were conducting coordinated mission planning. The exercise was designed to test new techniques for combating chaos-corrupted targets, but the underlying tensions between the temples transformed the training scenario into actual combat. The fighting began when a Callidus operative accused an Eversor operative of displaying behavioral patterns consistent with chaos corruption, leading to a confrontation that quickly escalated into full-scale battle. The battle at the Urals facility demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of the Officio Assassinorum's training and equipment when turned against itself. Callidus operatives used their shape-shifting abilities to impersonate members of opposing factions, creating confusion and mistrust that made coordinated resistance impossible. Eversor operatives, their combat stimulants triggered by the violence, carved through the facility's defenders with mechanical precision while showing no distinction between friend and foe. Vindicare operatives established firing positions throughout the complex, eliminating targets with surgical precision while the battle raged around them. The siege of the primary Officio Assassinorum facility beneath the Imperial Palace began when Loyalist forces attempted to restore order by occupying the organization's command centers. The operation involved elements of the Adeptus Custodes, Imperial Fists, and loyal members of the Officio Assassinorum who had remained neutral during the initial factional conflicts. The assault forces expected to encounter conventional defensive positions and standard Imperial security measures, but instead found themselves facing the full range of assassination techniques and specialized equipment developed by the temples over millennia. The underground complex's architecture worked against the attacking forces, as the narrow corridors and specialized chambers had been designed to facilitate covert operations rather than conventional military defense. Callidus operatives used their knowledge of the facility's layout to establish ambush positions throughout the complex, while their shape-shifting abilities allowed them to impersonate members of the assault force and create confusion within the Loyalist ranks. The defenders' intimate knowledge of the facility's hidden passages and secret chambers gave them enormous tactical advantages over the attacking forces. The casualties inflicted during the siege exceeded even the most pessimistic projections of Imperial military planners. Eversor operatives, their combat stimulants triggered by the violence, proved capable of eliminating entire squads of Space Marines before succumbing to accumulated damage. Their enhanced physiology and chemical-induced berserker fury allowed them to continue fighting despite injuries that would have killed normal humans instantly, while their neuro-gauntlets and specialized weapons proved devastatingly effective against power armor and advanced defensive systems. Vindicare operatives established firing positions throughout the complex's upper levels, using their enhanced marksmanship skills to eliminate key targets among the assault force. Their specialized ammunition proved particularly effective against the Adeptus Custodes, as shield breaker rounds could penetrate the advanced defensive systems protecting these elite warriors. The operatives' ability to remain concealed for extended periods allowed them to conduct sustained sniper operations that gradually eroded the assault force's effectiveness through the systematic elimination of officers and specialists. The Culexus operatives present during the siege created additional complications for both sides, as their psychic null fields disrupted the enhanced senses and coordination abilities of Space Marines, while also interfering with the specialized equipment used by their fellow assassins. The presence of these operatives created zones of psychological terror that affected all combatants, causing panic and disorientation that made coordinated tactical movements extremely difficult. The null fields also interfered with communication systems and targeting equipment, further complicating the already chaotic battle conditions. The siege's conclusion occurred when Loyalist forces finally gained access to the facility's primary command center, only to discover that the surviving temple masters had already implemented emergency protocols that would deny the complex to enemy forces. The protocols involved the systematic destruction of sensitive equipment and records, combined with the release of biological agents that would eliminate any remaining personnel while rendering the facility uninhabitable. The Temple Master's final act involved the activation of explosive charges that collapsed several levels of the complex, burying the evidence of their activities beneath tons of rubble and debris. The aftermath of the Assassins' War left the Officio Assassinorum in ruins, with 3 of the 4 primary temples effectively destroyed and their surviving members scattered across the galaxy. The Callidus Temple suffered the heaviest casualties, as their reliance on close-quarters combat and infiltration techniques made them vulnerable to the enhanced senses and combat abilities of Space Marine assault forces. The Eversor Temple's survivors faced particular challenges, as their enhanced physiology and chemical dependencies made it difficult for them to operate independently without access to the specialized medical facilities that had been destroyed during the siege. The Vindicare Temple's survivors proved most successful at evading capture, as their training in concealment and long-range operations allowed them to establish hidden bases throughout the Sol system. However, their effectiveness was severely compromised by the loss of their specialized equipment and manufacturing facilities, forcing them to rely on improvised weapons and ammunition that lacked the precision and effectiveness of their traditional gear. The Culexus Temple's survivors faced unique challenges due to their psychological effects on normal humans, making it difficult for them to receive support from other Imperial forces or establish new operational bases. The investigation into the Assassins' Wars causes revealed evidence of manipulation by external forces, including possible infiltration by Alpha Legion operatives and corruption by Chaos cults that had penetrated the organization's security protocols. The investigation's findings suggested that the factional conflicts had been deliberately encouraged by enemy agents who sought to neutralize the Officio Assassinorum's threat to the traitor cause. However, the extent of this manipulation remained unclear, as the destruction of the organization's records and the deaths of key personnel made comprehensive investigation impossible. The post-heresy reforms implemented by the surviving Primarchs and the newly formed High Lords of Terra included extensive restrictions on the Officio Assassinorum's operational autonomy and organizational structure. The reforms prohibited the concentration of assassination capabilities under a single command authority, instead requiring approval from multiple Imperial institutions before major operations could be authorized. The new oversight mechanisms included representation from the Adeptus Custodes, the Inquisition, and the Adeptus Mechanicus, ensuring that no single faction could manipulate the organization for their own purposes. The reconstruction of the Officio Assassinorum proceeded slowly and cautiously, with extensive screening procedures designed to prevent the infiltration of traitor elements or chaos corruption. The new organizational structure emphasized smaller, more independent operational cells that could function effectively even if other elements of the organization were compromised. The temple system was retained, but modified to include additional security protocols and oversight mechanisms that would prevent the kind of factional conflicts that had destroyed the original organization. The restrictions placed on the Officio Assassinorum included limitations on the types of targets that could be engaged without explicit authorization from the High Lords of Terra. The new protocols required extensive justification for any assassination mission, including detailed analysis of the target's strategic importance and the potential consequences of their elimination. The approval process could take months or even years to complete, effectively preventing the kind of rapid response operations that had characterized the organization's activities during the Great Crusade. The reconstruction of the Officio Assassinorum following the heresy proceeded under the watchful eye of the newly established High Lords of Terra, who viewed the organization's previous autonomy as a dangerous precedent that had contributed to the galaxy-spanning civil war. The new oversight structure required the Grand Master of Assassins to report directly to a council of High Lords, rather than operating under the independent authority that had characterized the organization during the Great Crusade. This fundamental shift in command structure created bureaucratic delays that would plague assassination operations for millennia, as missions that once required hours to authorize now demanded weeks or months of deliberation among competing imperial factions. The temple reconstruction efforts focused on establishing smaller, more distributed facilities that could operate independently if other elements of the organization were compromised. The new Callidus temple facility was constructed within the Mariana Trench, its chambers carved into the oceanic bedrock and accessible only through underwater approaches that would deter casual investigation. The facility's design incorporated multiple escape routes and self-destruct mechanisms that could be activated if the complex faced capture, ensuring that sensitive training methods and equipment would not fall into enemy hands. The Eversor Temple's new facility occupied a heavily fortified position within the Australian Dead Zone, surrounded by automated defense systems and radiation barriers that would kill unprotected intruders within minutes of exposure. The complex's medical facilities were distributed across multiple underground levels, with redundant life support systems and chemical production capabilities that could maintain operations even if portions of the facility were destroyed. The temple's bioalchemists worked under constant surveillance by Mechanicus representatives, who monitored their research to prevent the development of biological weapons that might threaten Imperial personnel. The Vindicare temple established its new headquarters within a nondescript administrative building in the petitioner's city, relying on camouflage and misdirection rather than obvious fortifications to protect their operations. The facility's firing ranges extended through natural cave systems beneath the Imperial Palace, providing training environments that could accommodate the extreme ranges required for precision marksmanship. The temple's equipment production facilities were scattered across multiple locations throughout the Sol system, preventing any single attack from crippling their manufacturing capabilities. The Culexus temple's reconstruction proved most challenging due to the psychological effects their operatives had on normal humans. The new facility was located on Luna's far side, isolated from major population centers and accessible only through automated transport systems that minimized human contact. The complex's architecture incorporated specialized materials and geometric patterns designed to contain the null field effects while protecting essential personnel from psychological damage. The facility's staff consisted entirely of servitors and automated systems, as even the most conditioned humans could not tolerate prolonged exposure to the operative's presence. The new operational protocols established following the heresy required assassination missions to receive approval from at least 3 High Lords of Terra before deployment could be authorized. The approval process involved extensive documentation of the target's strategic importance, detailed analysis of potential consequences, and assessment of alternative approaches that might achieve the same objectives without resorting to assassination. The bureaucratic requirements created delays that often rendered missions obsolete by the time authorization was granted, as political situations changed and targets relocated or died from natural causes. The integration of inquisitorial oversight into assassination operations represented one of the most significant changes to the organization's structure. Inquisitors were granted the authority to monitor assassination missions and could countermand orders if they detected evidence of corruption or unauthorized activities. The Inquisition's involvement created additional layers of security screening and psychological evaluation for assassination operatives, but also introduced potential conflicts between different imperial institutions with competing priorities and objectives. The appointment of Draken Vangorich as Grand Master of Assassins occurred during the early 32nd millennium, as the Imperium struggled to recover from the devastation of the Horus Heresy. Vangorich's selection reflected the High Lord's desire for a leader who could restore the organization's effectiveness while maintaining strict adherence to the new oversight protocols. His background as a former administratum official provided him with the bureaucratic skills necessary to navigate the complex approval processes, while his demonstrated loyalty to the imperial cause satisfied the security concerns of the various oversight bodies. Vangorich's early tenure as Grand Master focused on rebuilding the organization's operational capabilities, while establishing new training protocols that incorporated lessons learned from the heresy. The new training regimens emphasized psychological conditioning designed to prevent the kind of factional conflicts that had destroyed the original organization, while also providing operatives with enhanced resistance to chaos corruption. The Grand Master implemented regular psychological evaluations and loyalty assessments that would identify potential problems before they could compromise operations. The reconstruction efforts proceeded slowly due to the extensive security screening required for all personnel involved in assassination operations. Potential recruits underwent months of investigation and psychological evaluation before being accepted for training, while existing personnel were subjected to regular loyalty assessments and monitoring. The screening process eliminated many qualified candidates who might have served effectively under the previous system, but the High Lords considered this acceptable given the catastrophic consequences of the Assassins' War. The War of the Beast in the 32nd millennium provided the first major test of the reconstructed Officio Assassinorum's capabilities. The massive orc invasion threatened Terra itself, creating a crisis that demanded immediate action rather than the prolonged deliberation that characterized normal assassination operations. Vangorich received emergency authorization to deploy operatives against the orc leadership, bypassing many of the usual approval processes in recognition of the existential threat facing the Imperium. The assassination attempts against the Beast and his lieutenants demonstrated both the effectiveness of the new training methods and the limitations imposed by the reduced organizational structure. Vindicare operatives succeeded in eliminating several orc warbosses, disrupting the invasion's command structure and creating opportunities for Imperial forces to exploit. However, the limited number of available operatives meant that the organization could not sustain the kind of comprehensive campaign that might have been possible under the original system. The Beast's eventual defeat through conventional military action, rather than assassination, highlighted the reduced role that the Officio Assassinorum played in Imperial strategy. The organization's contributions to the war effort were significant but not decisive, marking a fundamental shift from the crucial role that assassins had played during the Great Crusade. This change reflected both the deliberate limitations placed on the organization and the evolution of imperial military doctrine toward more conventional approaches to warfare. The political aftermath of the War of the Beast created new challenges for Vangorich's leadership, as various factions within the imperial hierarchy sought to exploit the crisis for their own advantage. The Grand Master found himself navigating increasingly complex political relationships as different High Lords pursued competing agendas while maintaining the facade of unified imperial governance. The assassination protocols that had been designed to prevent unauthorized operations now became tools for political manipulation, as various factions used the approval process to advance their own interests. Vangorich's growing frustration with the bureaucratic constraints placed on his organization led to increasingly aggressive interpretations of his authority. The Grand Master began authorizing missions that technically fell within his operational parameters, but clearly violated the spirit of the oversight protocols. These operations targeted individuals whose elimination served the Imperium's broader interests, but whose deaths could not be directly linked to specific threats or military objectives. The systematic elimination of corrupt officials and incompetent commanders represented Vangorich's attempt to address the systemic problems that plagued imperial governance. The Grand Master's operatives targeted individuals whose actions undermined imperial effectiveness, including planetary governors who diverted resources for personal gain and military commanders whose incompetence resulted in unnecessary casualties. These assassinations were technically justified under the organization's mandate to eliminate threats to imperial security, but they represented a significant expansion of the Grand Master's traditional authority. The assassination of several High Lords' personal associates and political allies marked the beginning of the crisis that would become known as the beheading. Vangorich's operatives eliminated individuals who had not been formally designated as targets by the Oversight Council, instead acting on the Grand Master's personal assessment of their threat to imperial security. The deaths appeared to be accidents or natural causes, but the pattern of eliminations suggested systematic targeting of individuals who opposed Vangorich's vision for imperial governance. The High Lord's growing awareness of Vangorich's unauthorized activities created a climate of paranoia and suspicion that paralyzed imperial governance. Individual High Lords began implementing extensive personal security measures and avoiding public appearances, while their staffs underwent constant screening for potential assassins. The fear of assassination became so pervasive that normal administrative functions ground to a halt, as officials refused to take actions that might attract the Grand Master's attention. The confrontation between Vangorich and the High Lords escalated when the Grand Master issued ultimatums demanding the removal of officials he considered incompetent or corrupt. The ultimatums were delivered through official channels, but carried the implicit threat of assassination if the High Lords refused to comply. The Grand Master's demands included the replacement of several planetary governors, the reorganization of military command structures, and the implementation of administrative reforms that would increase the Officio Assassinorum's operational autonomy. The High Lord's refusal to comply with Vangorich's demands triggered the systematic elimination of imperial leadership that characterized the beheading. The Grand Master's operatives struck simultaneously across Terra, eliminating multiple High Lords and their senior staff within hours of each other. The coordinated assault demonstrated the organization's capabilities when freed from bureaucratic constraints, but also revealed the extent to which Vangorich had violated the trust placed in him by imperial authorities. The elimination of the High Lords created a power vacuum that threatened to collapse imperial governance entirely. The surviving officials lacked the authority to make crucial decisions, while the fear of further assassinations prevented them from taking actions that might restore order. The crisis extended beyond Terra as planetary governors and military commanders received conflicting orders from different imperial authorities, creating confusion and paralysis throughout the Imperium's administrative structure. The Space Marine chapter's response to the beheading reflected their unique position within imperial society as autonomous military organizations with their own command structures and traditions. The chapter masters recognized that the crisis threatened the stability of the Imperium itself, potentially creating opportunities for external enemies to exploit the confusion and weakness. The Imperial Fists, as the defenders of Terra, took the lead in organizing the response to Vangorich's coup, but their actions required careful coordination with other chapters to ensure sufficient force to overcome the Officio Assassinorum's defenses. The planning for the assault on the Officio Assassinorum's facilities required extensive intelligence gathering and tactical preparation, as the Space Marines had limited knowledge of the organization's capabilities and defensive measures. The chapter masters consulted with surviving Imperial officials and military commanders to gather information about the assassination organization's structure and operations. The intelligence revealed that the facilities were heavily fortified and defended by operatives whose abilities exceeded those of normal humans, requiring specialized tactics and equipment to overcome. The Imperial Fist siege specialists took primary responsibility for breaching the Officio Assassinorum's underground facilities, using their expertise in fortress warfare to identify vulnerable points in the complex's defenses. The chapter's tech marines analyzed the facility's construction and power systems, developing plans for systematic destruction of key infrastructure that would disable the organization's defensive capabilities. The siege preparations included the deployment of specialized equipment designed to counter the various assassination disciplines, including psychic shielding to protect against Culexus operatives and enhanced sensors to detect Callidus infiltrators. The assault on the primary facility began with orbital bombardment designed to collapse the upper levels and seal the main entrances, forcing the defenders to rely on secondary escape routes that could be monitored and controlled by the attacking forces. The bombardment utilized precision strikes that avoided damaging the surrounding areas of the Imperial Palace, while creating sufficient destruction to disrupt the facility's defensive systems. The Space Marines' tactical doctrine emphasized containment and systematic elimination rather than rapid assault, recognizing that the defenders' specialized abilities made conventional attack patterns ineffective. The fighting within the facility's corridors demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of assassination techniques when employed in defensive operations. Callidus operatives used their shape-shifting abilities to impersonate Space Marines, creating confusion and friendly fire incidents that slowed the assault's progress. The narrow corridors and specialized chambers favored the defenders, who possessed intimate knowledge of the facility's layout and had prepared defensive positions that maximized their advantages over the attacking forces. Eversor operatives proved particularly challenging opponents for the Space Marines, as their enhanced physiology and combat stimulants allowed them to engage Astartes warriors on nearly equal terms. The chemical-induced berserker fury made them immune to intimidation and pain, while their specialized weapons could penetrate Space Marine armor and cause devastating injuries. The operatives' willingness to fight to the death meant that each encounter required significant resources and resulted in substantial casualties among the attacking forces. The Vindicare operatives' defensive positions throughout the facility's upper levels created additional challenges for the assault force, as their marksmanship skills and specialized ammunition proved effective against Space Marine armor. The operatives' ability to remain concealed for extended periods allowed them to conduct sustained sniper operations that gradually eroded the assault force's effectiveness. The Space Marines' response involved the systematic destruction of potential firing positions and the use of smoke and electronic countermeasures to disrupt the operatives' targeting systems. The presence of Culexus operatives within the facility created zones of psychological terror that affected even the Space Marines' enhanced mental conditioning. The null fields disrupted the Astartes' enhanced senses and coordination abilities, making tactical movement and communication extremely difficult. The operatives' animus speculums proved capable of causing permanent psychological damage to Space Marines who survived exposure, creating long-term casualties that extended beyond the immediate battle. The final confrontation with Vangorich occurred in the facility's command center, where the Grand Master had established his final defensive position, surrounded by the most elite operatives from all 4 temples. The battle lasted several hours, during which the Space Marines faced coordinated attacks from multiple assassination disciplines simultaneously. The Grand Master's personal combat abilities, enhanced by decades of training and access to the organization's most advanced equipment, allowed him to eliminate several Space Marines before succumbing to the overwhelming numerical superiority of the assault force. The aftermath of Vangorich's death and the destruction of the Officio Assassinorum's primary facility created the need for comprehensive reforms to prevent similar crises in the future. The surviving Space Marine chapter masters worked with the remaining Imperial officials to establish new oversight protocols that would ensure the organization could never again threaten Imperial stability. The reforms included the permanent assignment of Space Marine observers to assassination facilities and the requirement for chapter master approval for any operations targeting Imperial personnel. The reconstruction of the Officio Assassinorum following the beheading incorporated multiple layers of oversight and accountability designed to prevent the concentration of power that had enabled Vangorich's coup. The new organizational structure divided authority between multiple Grand Masters, each responsible for specific operational areas and subject to oversight by different Imperial institutions. The Temple Masters were granted increased autonomy in their operational decisions, but were required to report their activities to multiple oversight bodies. The modern deployment procedures established following the beheading require approval from at least 5 High Lords of Terra for any major assassination operation, with additional requirements for operations targeting Imperial personnel or allies. The approval process involves extensive documentation and justification, including detailed analysis of alternative approaches and potential consequences. The bureaucratic requirements ensure that assassination operations receive careful consideration, but also create delays that can render missions obsolete by the time authorization is granted. The integration of inquisitorial oversight into assassination operations provides an additional layer of security and accountability, as inquisitors possess the authority to monitor missions and investigate potential abuses of power. The Inquisition's involvement includes regular psychological evaluations of assassination operatives and investigations of any unusual patterns in mission assignments or target selection. The oversight relationship creates potential conflicts between different imperial institutions, but also provides safeguards against the kind of systematic abuse that characterized Vangorich's tenure. The contemporary threat environment in the era Indomitus has created new challenges and opportunities for the Officio Assassinorum's operations. The opening of the Great Rift has increased the prevalence of chaos corruption throughout the galaxy, creating numerous targets for assassination operations, while also making the detection and elimination of such threats more difficult. The organization's operatives must now contend with enemies who possess supernatural abilities and defensive measures that exceed anything encountered during the original Imperial expansion. Chaos cult infiltration of Imperial institutions represents one of the most significant threats facing the modern Imperium, as these organizations can corrupt entire planetary governments and military commands from within. The Officio Assassinorum's response involves the systematic elimination of cult leadership and the disruption of their recruitment and indoctrination networks. The operations require careful coordination with inquisitorial investigations to ensure that all cult members are identified and eliminated before they can spread their corruption to other imperial institutions. The assassination of Xeno's leadership has become increasingly important as various alien species have become more organized and aggressive in their opposition to imperial expansion. The Tau Empire's ethereal caste represents a particularly high-value target, as their elimination can disrupt entire cadre command structures and prevent coordinated resistance to Imperial forces. The operations require specialized techniques and equipment designed to overcome alien defensive measures and physiological differences that make conventional assassination methods ineffective. Rogue Imperial commanders present unique challenges for assassination operations, as these individuals possess extensive knowledge of Imperial military doctrine and security procedures. The elimination of such targets requires careful planning and specialized approaches that can overcome their understanding of assassination techniques and defensive measures. The operations often involve the use of assets and methods that the targets would not expect, including the deployment of operatives from temples that would not normally be assigned to such missions. The coordination between the Officio Assassinorum and other imperial institutions has become increasingly complex as the organization's role has evolved to address the diverse threats facing the modern Imperium. The integration with inquisitorial operations provides access to extensive intelligence networks and specialized resources, while also ensuring that assassination missions support broader strategic objectives. The relationship requires careful management to prevent conflicts between different institutional priorities and operational methods. The opening of the Great Rift fundamentally altered the operational landscape for the Officio Assassinorum, creating challenges that exceeded even the catastrophic disruptions of the Horus Heresy. The massive warp storm that split the galaxy in half-severed communication lines between Terra and vast swathes of Imperial territory, forcing the organization to operate with unprecedented autonomy in regions cut off from central command. Temple masters found themselves making strategic decisions that would previously have required approval from multiple high lords, as the bureaucratic oversight systems established after the beheading became impossible to maintain across the psychic maelstrom that now dominated the galaxy's core. The Cicatrix Maledictum's emergence coincided with a dramatic increase in chaos cult activity throughout Imperial space, as the enhanced warp presence made demonic possession and corruption significantly more common. Officio Assassinorum operatives reported encountering targets whose abilities exceeded anything in their training protocols, including planetary governors who could manifest psychic powers without prior indication of psyker potential, and military commanders whose tactical decisions seemed guided by supernatural intelligence. The organization's response required rapid adaptation of existing assassination techniques and the development of new equipment specifically designed to combat chaos-enhanced targets. Callidus operatives faced particular challenges when infiltrating organizations that had been corrupted by chaos influence, as their polymorphine-based shapeshifting abilities proved vulnerable to warp-based detection methods. Several high-profile mission failures occurred when targets possessed supernatural awareness that could perceive the operative's true nature despite perfect physical impersonation. The Temple's bioalchemists worked frantically to develop new formulations of polymorphine that incorporated blessed materials and psychic shielding, though the resulting compounds proved significantly more painful to use and carried increased risks of permanent physical damage. The return of Robute Guilliman to active command created unprecedented opportunities for cooperation between the Officio Assassinorum and the newly created Primaris Space Marines. The Primarch's pragmatic approach to imperial governance included recognition that surgical elimination of key targets could achieve strategic objectives more efficiently than conventional military campaigns. However, Guilliman's direct involvement in assassination planning created tensions with the oversight protocols established after the beheading, as the Primarch's authority superseded that of the High Lords, while his military background emphasized rapid decision-making over bureaucratic deliberation. The first joint operation between Culexus operatives and Primaris Space Marines occurred during the Plague Wars, where a powerful chaos sorcerer had established a demonic stronghold on Ix that resisted conventional assault. The Primarch authorized the deployment of a Culexus operative equipped with experimental equipment designed to amplify their null field effects, while Primaris Marines provided tactical support and extraction capabilities. The operation succeeded in eliminating the sorcerer and disrupting the demonic manifestation, but the Primaris Marines involved reported severe psychological trauma from prolonged exposure to the null field that required extensive conditioning to overcome. Guilliman's assessment of the Officio Assassinorum's capabilities led to significant modifications in Imperial military doctrine, as the Primarch recognized that the organization's potential had been severely constrained by the bureaucratic limitations imposed after Vangorich's coup. The Primarch's reforms included streamlined approval processes for assassination missions that supported active military campaigns, while maintaining the oversight mechanisms necessary to prevent unauthorized operations. The changes allowed for more responsive deployment of assassination assets while preserving the safeguards that prevented the organization from threatening Imperial stability. The integration of Primaris Space Marines into assassination operations required extensive modifications to existing protocols, as the enhanced Astartes possessed capabilities that exceeded those of their predecessors, while also presenting new challenges for coordination. Primaris Marines' enhanced senses and improved power armor systems made them more effective at detecting and countering assassination techniques, but their larger physical profile and distinctive equipment made covert operations more difficult. The solution involved developing specialized roles for Primaris Marines that emphasized their superior combat capabilities, while allowing traditional assassins to handle infiltration and precision elimination tasks. The The Torchbearer fleet's expansion across the galaxy created new opportunities for Officio Assassinorum operations, as the massive military campaigns provided cover for assassination missions while also generating intelligence about potential targets. Vindicare operatives embedded with the fleets identified numerous high-value targets among enemy leadership, including Chaos champions whose elimination could disrupt entire Warband command structures. The long-range nature of Vindicare operations proved particularly valuable in the fluid tactical environment of the Indomitus Crusade, where conventional forces might not have access to specific targets for extended periods. The Tau Empire's continued expansion presented unique challenges for assassination operations, as the Xenos species' technological advancement and collective decision-making processes made traditional targeting approaches less effective. The elimination of individual ethereals, while still valuable, no longer guaranteed the collapse of Tau resistance, as the species had developed more resilient command structures. Officio Assassinorum strategists adapted by targeting the technological infrastructure that supported Tau expansion, including the elimination of Earth caste engineers responsible for critical systems and the disruption of communication networks that coordinated multi-world operations. Eversor operatives proved particularly effective against Tau defensive positions, as their enhanced physiology allowed them to survive the concentrated firepower that characterized Tau military doctrine. The operatives' ability to close with enemy positions, despite heavy casualties, made them ideal for eliminating Tau commanders who relied on standoff engagement ranges to maintain tactical advantage. However, the Tau's adaptive nature meant that successful Eversor deployments often resulted in rapid countermeasures that reduced the effectiveness of subsequent operations using similar techniques. The emergence of the Tyranid Hive Fleet Leviathan created existential threats that required unprecedented cooperation between the Officio Assassinorum and other imperial institutions. The Tyranids' biological nature made conventional assassination techniques largely ineffective, as the destruction of individual organisms had minimal impact on the overall hive mind's capabilities. The organization's response involved the development of new biological weapons designed to target the Tyranids' genetic structure, while also focusing on the elimination of human collaborators who provided intelligence or resources to the advancing hive fleets. Venom Temple specialists, working in coordination with biology's adepts from the Adeptus Mechanicus, developed toxins specifically designed to disrupt Tyranid bioform's cellular structure. The compounds proved effective against smaller organisms, but required massive quantities to affect larger bioforms, making their deployment logistically challenging. The most successful applications involved the contamination of biomass that the Tyranids would consume, allowing the toxins to spread through the hive fleet's digestive networks and cause widespread disruption to their biological systems. The Genestealer cult infiltration of imperial worlds presented targets more suitable for traditional assassination techniques, as the hybrid organisms retained human-like command structures that could be disrupted through targeted elimination. Callidus operatives proved particularly effective at infiltrating cult organizations, as their shape-shifting abilities allowed them to impersonate cult members while gathering intelligence about the infestation's extent. The operations required careful coordination with inquisitorial investigations to ensure that all cult members were identified and eliminated before they could signal the approaching hive fleet. The rise of the Death Guard and other Chaos Space Marine warbands in the wake of the Great Rift created targets that combined the enhanced physiology of Astartes with the supernatural resilience of Chaos corruption. Traditional assassination techniques proved largely ineffective against these opponents, as their diseased biology could survive injuries that would kill normal humans, while their connection to Chaos gods provided supernatural protection against many forms of attack. The Officio Assassinorum's response involved the development of specialized equipment incorporating blessed materials and the coordination of assassination attempts with broader military operations that could exploit the confusion created by leadership elimination. Nurgle-corrupted targets presented particular challenges due to their resistance to biological weapons and toxins, as the plague god's influence often granted immunity to substances that would prove lethal to normal humans. Venom specialists worked with ecclesiarchy representatives to develop compounds that incorporated holy water and other blessed materials, creating toxins that could affect chaos-corrupted targets through spiritual rather than purely biological means. The resulting weapons proved effective, but required extensive preparation and blessing rituals that made their deployment times sensitive and logistically complex. The World Eater's berserker fury made them difficult targets for conventional assassination approaches, as their enhanced aggression and pain tolerance allowed them to continue fighting despite severe injuries. Vindicare operatives found that even successful hits with specialized ammunition might not immediately incapacitate these targets, requiring multiple shots or the use of explosive rounds that could cause significant collateral damage. The solution involved coordinating sniper operations with broader tactical strikes that could exploit the confusion created by the initial assassination attempt. The Thousand Suns' psychic abilities created unique challenges for Culexus operatives, as the Chaos Sorcerer's connection to Tzeentch often provided supernatural awareness of approaching null fields. Several high-profile mission failures occurred when targets detected Culexus operatives at ranges that exceeded their normal psychic sensitivity, suggesting that chaos corruption had enhanced their abilities beyond normal human parameters. The Temple's response involved the development of new approach techniques that minimized the operative's psychic signature while maintaining the effectiveness of their null field weapons. The Iron Warrior's defensive expertise made them particularly challenging targets for Eversor operatives, as their fortress building skills and tactical knowledge allowed them to create defensive positions that could channel berserker charges into predetermined killing zones. The Chaos Space Marines' understanding of Imperial military doctrine also extended to assassination techniques, as many had fought alongside or against Officio Assassinorum operatives during the Horus Heresy. The organization's response involved the development of new tactics that exploited the psychological changes that chaos corruption had wrought in these ancient warriors. The Emperor's Children's pursuit of sensation and perfection created opportunities for Slaanesh-focused assassination techniques, as their enhanced senses and desire for new experiences made them vulnerable to certain types of toxins and sensory weapons. Venom specialists developed compounds that could overwhelm the enhanced nervous systems of these Chaos Space Marines, causing sensory overload that could incapacitate or kill targets despite their supernatural resilience. The weapons proved effective, but required precise delivery methods that could penetrate the elaborate armor and defensive measures that characterized Emperor's Children warbands. The coordination between Officio Assassinorum operations and the broader Imperial military effort in the 42nd millennium required constant adaptation to changing tactical situations and enemy capabilities. The organization's traditional emphasis on independent operations had to be balanced against the need for integration with larger military campaigns that could provide cover and support for assassination missions. The solution involved the development of liaison protocols that allowed assassination operatives to coordinate with conventional forces while maintaining the operational security necessary for their missions. The Primaris Space Marines' enhanced capabilities created new possibilities for joint operations that combined assassination techniques with conventional military tactics. The Astartes' improved sensors and communication systems could provide real-time intelligence about target locations and movements, while their superior mobility allowed them to provide rapid extraction for assassination operatives who might otherwise be trapped in hostile territory. The coordination required extensive training and the development of new communication protocols that could function despite the psychic interference that characterized many modern battlefields. The Inquisition's expanded role in combating chaos corruption created additional opportunities for cooperation with the Officio Assassinorum, as many inquisitorial investigations identified targets that required elimination rather than capture or interrogation. The relationship between the two organizations had evolved significantly since the post-heresy period, with established protocols for sharing intelligence and coordinating operations. However, the increased prevalence of chaos corruption meant that both organizations had to develop new security measures to prevent infiltration by enemy agents who might exploit their cooperation for strategic advantage. The Adeptus Mechanicus technological expertise proved crucial for developing new equipment and techniques that could address the supernatural threats emerging in the 42nd millennium. The tech priests' understanding of both technology and the warp allowed them to create hybrid weapons that combined conventional assassination tools with psychic shielding and blessed materials. The collaboration required careful negotiation of theological and practical concerns, as the Mechanicus beliefs about the nature of flesh and machine sometimes conflicted with the biological modifications required for assassination operatives. The Officio Assassinorum's role in maintaining imperial unity through the selective elimination of threats had evolved significantly by the 42nd millennium, as the organization adapted to address challenges that exceeded anything encountered during its original formation. The opening of the Great Rift had created a galaxy where supernatural threats were commonplace and conventional military doctrine often proved inadequate against enemies who possessed abilities that transcended normal human understanding. The organization's response involved not only the development of new techniques and equipment, but also a fundamental reassessment of its strategic role within the broader imperial hierarchy. The enduring philosophy of surgical elimination remained central to the organization's operations, but its application had expanded to encompass threats that required spiritual as well as physical destruction. The integration of blessed materials and religious ceremonies into assassination protocols reflected the recognition that many modern enemies could only be defeated through methods that addressed both their material and supernatural aspects. The changes represented a significant evolution from the organization's origins as a purely secular instrument of imperial policy, acknowledging the reality that the 42nd millennium's threats required responses that transcended conventional military doctrine. The Officio Assassinorum's survival through the tumultuous events of the 42nd millennium demonstrated the enduring value of its core mission, even as the specific techniques and targets evolved to address new challenges. The organization's ability to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining its essential character as an instrument of imperial will ensure its continued relevance in an era where the very survival of humanity hung in the balance. As the galaxy burned around them and new threats emerged from the darkness between the stars, the assassins of the Emperor continued their eternal vigil, serving as the hidden blade that struck at the heart of humanity's enemies when conventional weapons proved insufficient to preserve the Imperium's survival.